Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here on the KSAM Sports Podcast.
What? It's football.
Football is back! Yes! We're back in living color. I mean, football has been back, but
the
NFL is back. Very exciting. I'm very jazzed up given that it's very early in the morning and I've already been up for 7 hours. Either way, I'm Carlos Zimmerman. That's Jordan Smith over there.
Hi.
Glad to have you with us back here on the KSAM Sports Podcast. I hope you're awake with us now that we've woken you up a little bit.
Made my ears bleed. Yes.
Oh, you'll get over it.
I'm old. I'm sensitive.
I'm 2 years younger than you.
Right. I'm over halfway to qualifying for AARP.
I'm already halfway there as
yeah,
well.
congratulations.
So.
You finally got there.
Yes. I hate you. Anyway, welcome back here on the podcast. Glad to have you with us wherever you may be on this fine Thursday. Well, we got a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
As the title states, football, and football.
Yeah, exactly.
More specifically, Hornet football, Bearcat football, and the NFL.
Yep, exactly.
And we might slide in some MLB later on deep into the show, so because we have to.
Because we're deep in the heart of Texas.
Absolutely. As looking ahead, tomorrow night, Huntsville Hornets taking on the Belton Tigers following their thrashing of the Bryan Vikings last Friday. And Jordan, you had the call for that one, filling in for me. I mean, aside from the technical difficulties that we endured that night, just all-around incredible ball game by the Hornets, and just really every phase of the game, they looked like a cohesive unit.
They did, and it was a good sight to see. You know, they beat Bryan last year by one score. You know, you were kind of going into it thinking maybe it was going to be somewhat of the same ball game. You weren't really sure how they were going to respond after A&M consolidated. You know, there was still the issue of whether Isaiah Collins was going to play or not last week, and he was officially ruled out the morning of the game. So, you know, there was a couple different factors going into it. But the main thing was, as Luke and I kind of detailed, you know, as long as they got the running game going like they did in that game against A&M Consolidated, they would have done just fine. And that they did. But not only that, they got a lot of help in other areas as well. 2 interceptions, once again, back-to-back weeks with 2 interceptions by the defense, a forced fumble, a block once again, the running game as well. Nobody over 100 yards this time, but as a collective unit, 42 carries, 175 yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns to just the 1 fumble. It was a big improvement from the game against A&M Consolidated.
Yes.
Austin Taylor really started to take to his own as the quarterback spot, 10 to 12 passing, 83 completion percentage, 199 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, a 224 quarterback rating. So he really took advantage of his opportunities. Melton Green, the third, 4 catches, 127 yards, and a touchdown to his name as well. 1 of 3 touchdowns in the receiving game, obviously. So only touchdowns came from Austin Taylor. Some defensive touchdowns as well, including a Kadarian Easley pick 6.
Sure.
Yeah, defensive end, sure. Pick it up out of the air, just run, sure.
And I didn't see this, obviously, because did that happen in the second half down the stretch, or was that early in the first half?
That was in the first half.
So,
it was also one-handed.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. It was a one-handed stab.
Yeah.
Looking like Keith Traylor out there.
Basically. Yeah, it shocked me because, you know, obviously, growing up a Texans fan, you're used to J.J. Watt getting interceptions, pick sixes, what have you. You're not expecting to see that from a defensive lineman in high school football in the second week of the season with a one-handed catch.
It's athleticism at its finest.
It is.
Is
so
what it is.
That was a pleasant surprise to see. But like you said, overall, it was a very good ball game by the Huntsville Hornets. And it was a game that, you know, it showed a lot. I think it was a positive game for them, obviously, getting the huge victory. But now it's going to be a matter of, okay, how can they carry that momentum? How can they, you know, take those expectations of, we're probably not going to do this again this season unless we've just found our stride somehow and we become the North Shore Mustangs. But, you know, you look at it and you say, okay, how do we, you know, come from this and realize that you're going against, you know, you're not going against a 6A team, obviously, in the Belton Tigers, but you're still going against a very tough opponent in Belton, who handedly took care of business against you at their place last year. How do you respond from that game last year into this game, and how do you respond off the momentum you get from the 40-point difference or whatever it ended up being against the Bryan Vikings into this game? How do you manage both of those expectations?
Well, I think one big thing for the Hornets is that they have 3 players on the current roster right now that did not play in the Belton game last year that I think is going to give them a boost.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Jawan Giddens did not play that game.
Right.
He was out injured. JT Kroll did not play that game. He
Right.
was out injured, so he's now giving that extra protection on the offensive line.
Blindside blocker.
Blindside blocker, and then also is seldomly, of course, used on the defensive side.
Right.
And then the third one, Trayshawn Brown, because we didn't know we knew of his talent, but he hadn't had the opportunity to be called up yet to the main roster. So those are 3 players that Belton obviously has had to prepare for going into this ball game, watching them on film, having not seen them last year. Of course, Belton has a different look now. Coach Rodney Southern spoke with us earlier this week. Their quarterback from last year, he's now at Waco Midway. So it's a different guy, but bringing in a guy from Temple, who is also a really solid 5A program, that is paramount. That was paramount for Belton that they made that replacement, but their ground game is still very potent and is still a very solid defense, especially in the trenches on the front line. So that is the opponent that the Hornets are going to really have to really focus on, obviously, this week and what they're going to be up against, because I think this is a great test to see where they're really at. You had that one game that you let slip away down the stretch, a game you could have won, but you let it slip away, and then you finally have that game that they haven't had in a very long time.
It's been years.
A decisive blowout victory. One of their biggest margins of victory I'd say in the last 3 years.
As usually the last couple seasons, they've been on the other side of it.
Right.
Where they, especially last year, I mean, even look at the Belton game from last year. They
It
were on the other side of it.
It was ugly for a little while until they got some garbage time touchdowns, but I'll go ahead and look it up right now. Looking at last year, they didn't have a single really decisive victory. All their wins were decided by either 1 or 2 scores.
Right.
And then you look at the year before that, the year they missed the postseason, I don't really think there was much there. 13-point win over Willis, a 15-point win over Kingwood, a 12-point win over Lake Creek, and a 6-point win over Fulshire. So they have not had that kind of ball game since the last time they were in the postseason. Back in 2020, during the weird year that was.
Right.
31-point win over Willis, a 19-point win over Rudder, a 20-point win over Consol, smoking Lamar Consolidated in Lake Creek by more than 5 scores.
Yeah, in a season where you were playing, 3rd, 4th round playoff games Christmas weekend, when that's usually the state title weekend.
That was the year they made it to the 3rd round, losing to Crosby in overtime.
Yeah.
And the only reason I remember that is because you and I, our first ever, one of our first ever productions for this radio station was that ball game.
Right.
And so I remember that clear as day. So, yeah, it's been a while for the Hornets to be able to have a win like that. And to me, that's a sign of good things to come. But time will tell. And definitely the game tomorrow night is going to tell. How is Austin Taylor going to perform? Now that he's, like we talked about with Coach Southern, he's gained that separation from Marcus Lewis in terms of the skill, not the skill per se, but the just the overall play out there on the field. But Marcus is still going to be obviously involved, but Austin's obviously going to take more of the reps in live ball play. Does Braylon Phelps and Trayshawn Brown continue to develop there in the backfield? Do you get Peyton Pryor back going again, and will the receiving core stay up to standard as well?
I say because Peyton Pryor's second on the team of receiving in the game, 2 catches, 41 yards, no touchdowns for him. He had a little bit of an impact as well in the first game. I believe, actually, he was one of the higher receivers when it came to yards in the first game against A&M Consolidated. So he's had a little bit of an impact this year. Hasn't, like you said, we'll see if he has a little bit more. It also is going to kind of depend on whether or not Isaiah Collins, starts playing again, or if he's out again. That, I think, is going to be a determination of how much they're really going to go to Peyton Pryor, because he's basically the replacement for Isaiah Collins, at least for me, on the offensive side. Because to me, at least, Conte and Melton Green seem like the two without Collins.
I'm not trying to burst your bubble. Collins is a cornerback.
Well, I thought he was a receiver as well.
No.
And the 2 deep is interesting. I'd swear it had him as a receiver.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's just.
I could be wrong, but I thought I remember seeing that.
No.
Point being.
I think you're getting Collins and Conte mixed up.
No, I don't know.
Anyway.
I look back at the tape. It's been a long week, folks.
It has. I've been on the mornings all week here on KSAM, so.
But yeah, I mean, talking about the running game, Braylon Phelps and Trayshawn Brown, yeah, I mean, that is a two-headed monster that I am very excited to see get going. Because as you know, as I've harped on this show before, as I harp in any football season and any football game I ever watch, if you don't have a running game, you're not going to have an offense. And I know saying that, it's a quarterback-driven game. I get that. I understand that. Let's look at the facts. Right now, until this past week, you didn't have a solid number one. Your running game was the only part of the offense you really had, besides a rebuilt offensive line.
Right, and Brown was the one that ran it against A&M Consolidated very well, over 100 yards rushing.
Exactly. So, you look at that and say, you have to, with this offense, you have to rely, even still, you have to rely on that running game as the number one option. If Austin Taylor breaks away again and has a stellar game this week, then you could say, all right, you're definitely the number one guy. It's time for you to start taking charge, start taking chances down the field, whatever. But until then, you're going to have to rely on Phelps and Brown to get it done. And, I mean, this last week they took most of the yards when it comes to the rushing game.
158 of the 175 came from them.
Exactly. And three of the 4 rushing touchdowns.
Right. So that's what it's going to come down to. And then we can't forget about the defense, too.
Right.
The defense needs to remain up to standard. That front line for the Hornets, a very potent front line. Not as big as they've been in previous years, but they still have a lot of, talent on that front defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
The linebacker core obviously is really, for lack of a better term, the heart and soul of the defense.
Right.
Jawan Giddens, who, like I said earlier, didn't play last year against Belton. Shiloh Jones, who had a breakout year last year, starting with that Belton game, and now he's back here as a mainstay. And then you got McCorrick Norman, Trayvon Johnson backing up those guys as well. And then that secondary needs to be performing well because they're the kind of ones that have to be on their heels because they're up against a quarterback who is another dual threat.
Right.
He can make plays with his legs, but he's got a really good arm as well. So they've got to be cognizant of what they're doing in the secondary, not letting their receivers, burn them for routes or burn them on their routes. If they do that, I think the Hornets have themselves in a really good position because you look at Belton and what they did last week, they beat Brenham 27-20, and that's a team the Hornets also lost to last year.
Yeah.
So if you go in there and you beat Belton, just by the odds, you're looking at possibly a top 2 spot in the district. I don't want to get too far ahead because anything can happen once we get into district, and we saw that last year. But you see what I'm saying. They have a shot to be able to make some noise against a very, very good Belton squad.
They do. And the thing is, too, is that, you talk about that if they pull off the win at home against Belton, you go into the Clear Springs game next week, and at worst, you're 500 heading into district. I know that it doesn't matter once you get to district, but point being, you saw what they had to do last year where they basically had to win 3 games in the district season out of their, 6 district games to get into the postseason.
Yep.
So, they're definitely able to beat these district opponents. And if you come in already with a couple of wins, that's going to help you a lot when it comes to gaining confidence heading into district. Maybe you pick up an extra 4th win. Maybe you raise those totals. I mean, hey, right now, you're already halfway to your win total last season. Mm-hmm. So it is a positive sign of things to come, and looking at the Belton side of things, their quarterback in Reese Rumfield, he hasn't had to do too much through the air. 379 yards so far in 2 games, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, a 105 QBR. He averages 189.5 yards per game. 14.5 per pass, 26 of 45 through the air. That's it.
So really, it's been their ground game.
It's been their ground game, but also their ground game. It hasn't been terrible, obviously, but it hasn't had to do too much either. 4 touchdowns so far through 2 games, 68 carries, so about we'll call that 34 per game, so about a decent number. 147.5 yards per game, so a good production. 295 rushing yards total. Their main rusher looks to be Mr. Snap, out of the backfield as far as yards go. Rumfield second on the team in rushing yards with 92 on the season through 20 carries. And he has two of the 4 rushing touchdowns himself. So that's going to be something to watch for, is the dual threat asset of Reese Rumfield, their starting quarterback, and seeing how he does. But I think somebody on the outside that they really need to watch out for, he's second in receiving, but it's I forget his first name. His last name is Peoples. It's junior Rayshon Peoples. Yeah. He's second on the team in receiving, 4 catches, 91 yards. 2 of the 4 touchdowns receiving have gone to him. He has the second highest average per reception with 22.8. The only other one that's ahead of him is Snap, the leading running back, who only has 1 reception for 34 yards.
Now, I do want to point something out. I just pulled up the 2 deep for Belton going into this ball game. Sean Snap is not on the 2 deep. So something may have happened in the Brenham game. So Jay Barola is going to be the one that gets the start at running back tomorrow night. Now, could that be a ruse? I don't know. But I remember what Sean Snap did last year against us, and he just absolutely torched Huntsville. Yeah. So we'll see how that pans out in this game. But looks like they're going to have a different look at running back going into this ball game. You have the stats pulled up. Does he have anything?
Barola has... Through 2 games, he has 7 carries for 14 yards and a touchdown. Longest is 6 yards.
So he's averaging 2 yards a carry. And so he hasn't gotten a lot of snaps at running back. So if that's the case, they're really going to need to lean on Rumfield in this ball game.
He's the 4th leading rusher on the team behind Guerrero, who has 3 carries for 30 yards.
And he's a wideout. So,
he's the leading receiver on the team with 7 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown.
So those are some names you're going to have to watch for in the ball game tomorrow night, and obviously they have a lot of great help on the defensive side as well. I'm expecting a drawn-out battle because that's what Belton's had the last 2 games. Their opener against Pflugerville-Hendrickson, 8-point win, 35-27, and then the 7-point win over Brenham last week. So it's going to be another drawn-out fight in these kind of ball games. And, of course, as a broadcaster, you love to see, the more exciting games because, let's be honest, I mean, calling a blowout in favor of the team you're broadcasting for, that's always great and everything, but from a broadcasting standpoint, you're like, okay, let's just go home. But I love those kind of games where it's just, back and forth.
Right.
And I think that's what we're going to be getting coming up tomorrow night between these 2 schools.
And something else to look for as well with this game. Through 2 games, this Belton defense, it's really going to be a big test for this offensive line for Huntsville. This Belton defense has 17 tackles for loss through the first 2 games and 8 sacks through the first 2 games.
Oh, boy.
So that's going to be a huge test to see is how are they going to do? How is this offensive line? They got a couple games under their belt. Now they're going against probably their toughest task in this early part of the season.
I'd say so.
Even including the Clear Springs game next week. It's probably their toughest task when it comes to non-district play. So really this is going to be a big test, especially for like you said, JT Kroll, who's playing in this game this year, who did not play in last year's game. So that'll be a big test for the blind side blocker, if I can speak today, to see how well are they going to be able to keep them out of the backfield and how much time are they going to give Austin Taylor in that pocket.
So looking at the defense for Belton on their D-line, one of their D-linemen, or 2 of their D-linemen, 1'6", 189, 1'6", 197. So there is a little bit of size to that, but not what you're quite expecting out of a D lineman at the high school level. So they're probably going to be more one of those D linemen that are more muscular than anything, instead of, for lack of a better term, a little bit more wide. So
their formation is interesting. They run 3 defensive linemen. They run 3 linebackers. That's the thing. They run 3 linebackers. They run 2 safeties, but then they run what's called a robber, which is a safety that pulls in to disguise as a linebacker. So it's almost like they run a cover 3.
Yes.
So it's an interesting formation because they got the 2 regular corners and basically, quote unquote, 3 safeties, if you will, with that robber position that comes in and plays as a disguised linebacker. So it's an interesting formation. That's something that Huntsville's going to have to watch out for when they go up against them here tomorrow night. Is going to have to be, all right, looking at the robber, where is he set up? Is he kind of giving any signs? What specific formations? Is he throughout the game, halftime adjustments? Is he pulling back? Is he trying to make an extra rush? Whatever.
And that their robber is Sam Shepard.
Mm-hmm.
Senior DB, also plays as a wideout. He's 5'10", 160. So just by that alone, you know he's fast. He's definitely got some speed to him.
5 tackles already for him on the season.
So that's, like you said, that's something the Hornets are going to probably have to make adjustments to if they don't counter it right away. So that's the X factor, if you will, with this Belton squad. They can bring a lot of different formations at you. And I talked about that with Coach Southern in our pregame talk that we did earlier this week. And then, of course, at the coaches show on Monday night at the field. So I'm intrigued to see how they do. And like I said, if they pull off this win, this is going to be a lot of much-needed not only confidence but momentum for the Hornets. Could even potentially put them in a spot to be competitive with Clear Springs. Now, that's going to be definitely the best team they face in the non-district is Clear Springs, is a team that I believe either went 2 or 3 rounds deep in the postseason last year.
I believe so.
So we'll see what happens on that front. But that game kicking off 7:30 tomorrow night. We'll go on the air with the Charlie's Used Cars pregame show at 6:45 p.m. right here on the KSAM YouTube channel and on the FM airwaves on 101.7 KSAM-FM. Before we transition over to Bearcats, I obviously want to take a look at some other games that are going to be going on tomorrow night, games that we're going to be keeping an eye on. Of course, in the district for Huntsville, Lake Creek is going to be at home. They are taking on Waller. That might very well be a win for Lake Creek in the way they have been rolling as of late, especially coming off of a huge, big win over Fort Bend Elkins last Friday. Looking at some of the schools down in Rosenberg, Richmond, Randall, they're on the road taking on the Columbia Roughnecks coming up tomorrow. Randall's had a hot start to the year, someone we've been keeping an eye on here, a team that is, I believe, eligible for postseason now that they have juniors and seniors on the roster. Lamar Consolidated in the Hornets district. They're on the road taking on Houston Westbury on Saturday night. So that'll be one to watch. Brenham, after their tough loss to Belton, they will face the Bryan Vikings at Merrill Green Stadium. So we'll see if Brenham matches up with Bryan, potentially in the same way that Huntsville did. And then, of course, the Montgomery Bears, the team that the Huntsville Hornets will open district with. They are in Dayton tomorrow, taking on the Dayton Broncos. And then briefly just touching on teams around the region here in Southeast Texas. Trinity's on the road taking on Hardin. New Waverly is at home against Anahuac. Let's see, Livingston, they are going to be at home against Palestine. Anderson Shiro, I believe they are going to be home as well. No, they're going to be on the road taking on Snook. Snook.
Okay.
I learned that was a high school the other day.
Yeah?
Or a town. I learned that the other day.
You never heard that?
No, I haven't. And I was like,
Yeah.
Ain't that interesting? And then for Madisonville, they will be taking on Fairfield at home tomorrow night. So that's a look around some high school football games across the region and, of course, in Huntsville's district. And now, do we want to take a break or do we want to just dive right into this?
Dive in.
Let's dive into this Bearcat talk. So, brand new era for Sam Houston football. Really, Sam Houston at large. But it kicked off Saturday night. Deep in the hills of Provo, Utah. The mountains of Provo, Utah.
Right.
By the way, folks, if you haven't gone, you need to go to Utah. I've already gone 6 times. It's absolutely, I say that in jest, but not really in jest, but it was absolutely gorgeous. One of the most beautiful backdrops there at Lavelle Edwards Stadium that I've ever seen. When I got to the box after doing all my pregame stuff like that with BYU Sports Nation Game Day and with BYU Radio, I went up to the box and then I just looked out and saw the view, sat down and just didn't move for about 5 minutes. Took it all in because that's the only time that you're ever going to debut in the FBS. You only debut once, and the Bearcats did that on Saturday night. Was it the outcome we were hoping for? Of course not. But was it a game that we were expecting? I don't think so.
No, definitely not.
the defense was just absolutely phenomenal in the ball game, holding BYU to a very low amount of yards. I believe they ultimately held them to 257 yards.
Which I saw something is the lowest amount of yards that Sam Houston has allowed since they went up against number 2 Florida State. I want to say back in the early
The lowest an
2000s?
opponent has allowed BYU. Since
Something
2000,
like that,
since the
yeah.
year 2000 when they were against number 2 Florida State.
Yeah.
So that should tell you something right then and there, that this defense is pretty darn good. And you look at how they performed that night. Trevor Williams performing as advertised, 13 tackles, 5 of those solo and a tackle for loss. A lot of other guys stepped up. Elias Escobar had a tackle for loss. He also had 4 total in the game. Caleb Weaver and Isaiah Downs and Kavian Gaither, they all tandemed for 5 tackles in the game. So they did what we expected them to swarm and compete with BYU's offense. And they swarmed to the ball and were able to not they didn't allow much until down the stretch of the ball game, simply because they were just tired.
Right.
I mean, they were out there so much during the ball game, and that's because the offense just could not find its legs in the ball game.
Yeah. That was a roller coaster in its own. Watching the offense kind of do its thing. There was a couple of bright moments. For example, the fake play, the pass from the receiver. I'm blanking on the name. On the trick play by Sam Houston to go over the top. That got called back on the penalty.
Oh yeah. No, Noah Smith.
There you go. Yeah.
Beautiful pass.
It was a great pass. There was the block of the field goal. They got called back because of the offsides that wasn't originally called, but then just added just because. And then another penalty that was called on top of that originally.
Right.
So there was those moments. The Bearcats had plenty of opportunities. I mean, pretty much the entire game almost.
Yes.
To win it.
They were in it from the jump.
They were.
BYU's opening drive did lead to a score, but then they didn't score again until the start of the fourth quarter.
Right.
And that's all because of the defense and what they were able to do. But where the Bearcats struggled with offensively, it's just they could not move the ball down the field. Part of that, and Coach Keeler said it in the press conference this week, they couldn't get the ground game going.
No.
So I know there's a lot of people putting the blame on Keegan Shoemaker, but I don't think you can really blame him alone. Did he make some mistakes? Absolutely he did. That interception at the 5-yard line, back-breaking, and that really killed the Bearcats' momentum, especially because they had that momentum because of the fake punt called by BYU at the 20, at their own 20, and that was mind-boggling to me.
Didn't understand
up
that
there
one.
in the booth. I didn't get that at all. But I was like, in that moment, I was like, oh, great opportunity here. Just couldn't close it out there. Throwing that interception in the end zone, it obviously hurt us. But I don't think you can put all the blame on Keegan, because if your ground game isn't going and your quarterback is having struggles, part of that's the offensive line. And I'm not saying they didn't protect Keegan Shoemaker well, because they did. He was only sacked once, and he was out of the pocket when it happened. Jordan, I think I'm frozen.
Nah, I think it looks fine. Uno momento.
We'll let him fix that real quick. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I was like,
"That's quite funny." I'm gonna be honest with you,
Jordan.
That's
I don't.
funny.
And the funny thing is, I don't know how long I've been stuck.
I don't know either, but that's pretty funny. But yeah.
But while you work on that,
hold on a minute.
Hey, there we go.
Can I freeze it again?
No, you can't. Great times here on the KSAM Sports Podcast. Anyway, like I was saying, the offensive line was just really, and Keeler said this in the press conference too, they were overmatched in the trenches.
Right.
BYU's front 4, or the front 3 or 4 that they rolled out in the ballgame, they were just bigger and, to be honest, a little bit more talented. And those are the kind of games you're going to have sometimes. So that's why the offensive line just was not able to create those holes for guys like John Gentry and then Zach Urbachik, as well as Keegan Shoemaker. But they did a good job protecting the QB, because he was only sacked once and he was out of the pocket when it happened.
3 things with this. First thing, this was an absolutely beautiful defensive showcase by both of these teams. I don't think it could be said any better. It definitely was best case scenario for the Sam Houston defense, I think, besides giving a shutout. Best case scenario that you could have probably expected for this first game in the FBS. They've gone against FBS opponents before, but now being an FBS team and going against a team like BYU who just moved to, the Big 12 out of the independent scene, at least for football, then, it's a huge step for the defensive side. You talked about the running game earlier. Yeah, didn't really get that going at all. 24 carries for only 38 yards. Your longest run of the ball game was 8 yards by your starting quarterback in Keegan Shoemaker, who was in the yards gained, he was the leading rusher, but the net yards total, he was second most, where he had 6 carries, 25 yards, but then lost 12 yards, so only technically getting 13. But point being, yeah, when you can't get the running game going, you can't expect to have success. We talked about it in the Hornet segment. When you don't have the running game going, you can't expect to have success. That goes for all levels of football in general. Pee-wee, high school, middle school even. You got, college, pro, semi-pro, any of it. If you don't have a running game, you're not going to get your offense going. Now, you look at the quarterbacks. You talk about Shoemaker, 18 to 33, 147 yards, 3 interceptions, and the 1 sack. Look at the other side. Very, very similar score line.
Yes.
For Kadon Slovis. 20 carries. Keaton, whatever. Long week. 20 completions, 33 yards, 145 yards, just 2 yards less on 2 more completions. No touchdowns, no picks, and that's the main difference there, and not sacked at all in the ball game. So, really, it was a good game for both teams defensively, not a good game through the air for either quarterback whatsoever. But the main difference is the fact that BYU ran 34 carries for 112 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Their only touchdowns of the game coming through the ground. And that is the difference, is that the run defense for Sam Houston could not stop BYU's rushing attack. And the opposite, BYU completely stopped everything that Sam Houston could do.
You say that they couldn't stop the rushing attack. A lot of that yardage, especially for L.J. Martin in that came in the fourth quarter.
It did.
When the defense started to slow down. I would argue that, for the majority of the ball game, they did a good job stifling that run defense until down the stretch of the ball game. To me, the reason why they lost this game, and I know you agree with me on this, is that just the offense didn't have any legs. The defense did its job. If you can, in any given ball game, you only give up 14 points defensively, that's a win in of itself. You gave up 2 touchdowns, and both of them were to the starting quarterback who ran the ball in. 5-yard touchdown and a 1-yard score. And that reason that 1-yard score happened was because of a rather questionable interception call down the stretch in that third quarter.
It was an interception. I couldn't use the video board in the stadium.
Yeah. Now. So that's why.
Stop touching things.
I'm not touching anything.
Hold on.
That's a great
I love the
shot.
freeze frame.
That's a great shot.
Oh man.
Oh goodness.
We love it here on the KSAM Sports Podcast.
Indeed we do. While Jordan's still fixing that and that ugly mug that's going on right now. In the Casey Keeler era.
Yeah.
In his time with Sam Houston, he's faced a select amount of FBS opponents. 2014, his first one he faced, LSU. You got beat 56-0. You kind of expect that.
Yeah.
Then the next year, you go on the road to Lubbock and you give a scare to at the time, Mike Leach-led Texas Tech. Rest in peace. Losing 59-45. So we got that fixed finally. And then you fast forward through the years. 2016, you didn't face an FBS opponent. 2017, you didn't face an FBS opponent. You played an FCS opponent in an FBS stadium in Richmond at Waco because of Harvey, but you didn't face an FBS opponent. Same thing in 2018. 2019, you went to New Mexico, lost 39-31, and then, of course, last year losing it to Texas A&M in College Station 31-0. So your first game in the FBS level against an FBS opponent, obviously. It's your best performance since 2015 against an FBS opponent, and now this is your life now.
right?
If you will, if you're Sam Houston. This is the way it is going forward. And that's the performance you make in your debut.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to win some ball games this year.
You should. I don't think anybody expects them to go winless this year. I think, as I've said, to you, I don't know if I've said this publicly, but at least to you and a couple of our friends, I don't expect them to go, even before the BYU. I expect them to go undefeated, go, compete for a spot, for a New Year's Six game. I'm not expecting that, obviously. Because, one, they technically can't play in a bowl game this year unless certain circumstances happen. But, point being, I'm thinking 4 wins in this first year is probably a good year just because of the fact that it is an adjustment. At the end of the day, jumping from the FCS to the FBS is an adjustment.
Yes, it is.
And it takes a little bit to kind of get used to that. It takes a season to adjust, not just for the players, but the coaching staff and everybody else involved. So that's why I'm thinking, 4 wins is probably about where I had their mark. Based off this performance, probably not going to change only because I'm still waiting for the offense to, really get going. And I think this game against Air Force is really going to be a telltale sign of can they get it going against a team like Air Force who is coming into a situation that they've never been in before. They haven't played a game, at NRG in this kind of neutral scenario before, besides maybe a bowl game here and there. But otherwise, not really, because the only bowl game at NRG is the Texas Bowl.
Right.
Last I checked, they've never played in the Texas Bowl. So
No, but they are coming off of an Armed Forces Bowl win over Baylor. So I believe that bowl is played in the Lone Star State.
First Responders Bowl, they beat Louisville 31-28.
Are you sure?
Yep.
No, I was thinking of BYU.
Yeah, you're thinking BYU.
I was thinking of BYU. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm still on Utah time. Okay, so they beat Louisville.
Yes.
Last year in a bowl. So either way, they're coming off of a bowl win.
They
and
are.
They're coming off of a thorough demoralization of Robert Morris last week.
And before that, a almost thorough demoralization of Northern Iowa, 48-17. So they're 2-0 on the year.
So, and they had a phenomenal year in the Mountain West last year. The only reason they did not win that division is because Boise State decided to happen and go perfect in the conference. So this is a very good team that the Bearcats are going up against this week. And the big factor in all of that, the wretched triple option on the offensive side. You got a senior quarterback in Zach Larrier, who's going to be leading the charge there. Got the call this week for the start. He started last week against Robert Morris, had a great game. You got a great running back in John Eldridge III, another senior running back. So I'm looking up and down this entire Air Force starting 11 based on their depth chart here. 9 of their 11 starters are seniors. Very experienced roster when you compare it to Sam Houston's, which has good experience on it, but there is a solid mix of looking at the starters for Sam Houston this weekend. They have 2 senior starters, Keegan Shoemaker and Jack Sherrard. That's it. So for the future, that means
future, it's great.
You get all these back, but you have some of the inexperience out there right now against the very experienced offense in Air Force. So that's what the Bearcats are up against this weekend, is how are they going to be able to manage defensively against the triple option, and how will the offense respond after last week against BYU?
Yeah, and this is the first time that these two teams have ever faced one another.
Yep.
So it's not like they can go back and look at old film from last year. They've never seen each other before. They've never been on the same football field as each other.
They just have to look at the film that they have available to them from their last 2 games.
Yep, and so that's the thing is, like you said, it's going to be, I feel like the defense, they'll have to adjust in the beginning. I don't think they're ready, because you look at the FCS opponents they played, there weren't too many triple options. There may be a couple here and there, but they really haven't faced triple option before. So it's going to be a test to see how quick can that defense adjust to this game. Basically a quasi-home game for Sam Houston, if you will.
It is.
With it being at NRG. A quasi-home because they're not at Bowers, but it being a home field for them because it's something they're used to with playing there for the last, 12 years now?
Right. It is a place that they've called a home for the last 12 years.
Right.
It's the place where a lot of your alumni base is in Houston.
Yeah.
So you know that a lot of alumni are going to come out to this game. And the other fact that they got going for them as well, you're playing one of the military academies,
right?
Which is always a great spectacle at that.
Right.
whenever you play Air Force, Army, or Navy. And we know how the Army-Navy game goes every year.
Right.
So playing one of the Armed Force academies like Air Force is going to be a great experience, first off. But to be able to play them at a place that you are used to, an atmosphere that a lot of your players have become accustomed to over the last couple of years, especially those that have been around since even 2019 at that, because we still have guys from that team on the squad. That's going to benefit you, but the rest of the game is going to be determined based on how much you execute out there on the field, and my eyes are on the offense. The defense showed us that they can execute.
Yeah.
The offense needs to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, to me, this is make or break for Keegan Shoemaker. Because, yeah, you can't go off one game, but at the same time, we've seen him in the past come in, through the backup role past Piney Woods games, for example, at NRG, and win games for the Bearcats and really shine as the star, play a few more games, and do decently. You have to remember, though, they were in the FCS at that time. They were a powerhouse that could take a couple extra games to let him figure it out before you go to somebody else and still be fine. You're not in that ball game anymore. Every game matters like it's your last game in program history when it comes to the FBS level.
Yes.
You're not technically competing for anything besides the standard this year because you still have that one-year ban, again, depending on circumstances. But this is to me a make or break game for Shoemaker. If he cannot figure it out against this Air Force squad, you got to start thinking, you have 2 weeks. Do you start getting Grant Gunnell in there these next 2 weeks to really take over and potentially start that U of H game? But I don't want to go too far into that just yet. I want to see what Shoemaker does. I want to see if he can turn it around and have a good performance against Air Force. But this is his make or break game.
It is. And it's like you alluded to as well. He's had this experience at Piney Woods. I know it was at the FCS level, but it was still a high-profile game playing a rival in Stephen F. Austin.
It is. The oldest rivalry in the Lone Star State.
Yes. He comes in for an injured Eric Schmidt in 2021 in the fall and wins the game for Sam Houston. Kept them in the game the whole way, even though we were down the entire way. Last year, almost the same, almost a carbon copy. This time, though, he already had the starting role. He had already secured that the prior week after Jordan Yates was benched and ultimately got hurt.
Yeah.
He goes in, it's the same exact thing, and the Bearcats win at the buzzer.
Yeah.
So, will that be the case in this ball game on Saturday? I don't think it will be. I think it's not going to come down to a final play, and if it does, I will eat as much crow on the next episode of the podcast as possible.
Not Cougar Tail?
Not Cougar Tail. By the way, when you're in Provo, get some Cougar Tail. It's to die for. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And be careful when you look it up. Some other things may pop up. When you think about when you think about this for the Bearcats offensively, you have loads of talent in the receiving core, and you have a great running back in Zach Urbacek, but if the quarterback's not going, then the offense isn't going to be going. So I think part of it is Keegan needs to find that magic that he had at NRG from the last couple of years and translate that not only to this game, but for every game that is going to follow going forward, because once we get past U of H, it's conference games at that point. And it's another thing, too. Can this offensive line give the running holes for Zach Urbacek and John Gentry to run through? Because if the ground game's not going, then the quarterback game's not going to be going either.
Right.
So once they figure that out, then they'll be able – I think this will be an offense that will start turning it around. 7 o'clock kick on Saturday night. I think the latest we've ever been at NRG in the last 3 years.
I don't think it's ever been a primetime slot. It's usually been a mid-afternoon.
And it's nationally televised, CBS Sports Network. Myself and Brian Adams, we're going to have the call on GoBearcats.com and the Bearcats Sports mobile app. 6:30 pregame, 7 o'clock kick. It's going to be a lot of fun. It always is at NRG. So tune into the ball game, see how the Bearcats fare against Air Force. We'll step aside and take a break. NFL Talk coming up next on the KSAM Sports Podcast. Cole's runner cutting it back across the 40. Cole's runner 50, 45, 40, 30.
35-30, trying to stiff one more man. Oh, he's spun down at the 25-yard line.
Butler for three. Good!
Gives it to Twine at the right wing. Deep three. Got it!
In time!
The Hornets are heading to the postseason. Swing and a miss! It's over! Huntsville to the regional quarterfinals!
Welcome back to the KSAM Sports Podcast. My name is Jordan Smith, and the other side of the table is Carlos Zimmerman as we get into our final big segment of the show, and it's the NFL. It kicks off tonight.
Yes.
Carlos is happy about that.
Yes. I said I wasn't going to do any fantasy football drafts, and I have 5 leagues.
God.
Let's go.
I can't even mentally fathom doing 5 leagues anymore.
I have 3 on Sleeper and 2 on ESPN. So, no, sorry, flip that. 2 on Sleeper, 3 on ESPN.
I have 1.
It's the one the one we did last night.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, tonight, start of the NFL season on NBC, Lions versus Chiefs. When I heard this was the kickoff matchup, I said, really? This is what we're starting the season off with?
Yes.
Lions and Chiefs. Like, I get it. The Lions had a good season last year.
They did.
Beat a lot of expectations, went 9-8, missed the playoffs thanks to a tiebreaker against the Seahawks. But Lions? I guess.
I mean, yeah.
I guess I just have to get used to the fact that they win ball games now. I don't understand.
It's
the
not
most prime time they get is Thanksgiving Day. Like,
right.
What are we doing here?
And they usually lose on Thanksgiving anyway.
Right, exactly. So, I don't know. Like, I get the Chiefs. They're the defending Super Bowl champs. That's easy to figure out.
Right.
They're going to put the banner up, the whole 9, whatever yards, right? Whole 9 yards that Patrick Mahomes will run on the first play, whatever. Point is,
if he runs 9 yards on the first play tonight, I'm going to throw something.
Point being, it's like, I don't know, like, it seems like a very one-sided matchup.
Well, I think it's still intriguing because for a while there, we thought after Jared Goff left Los Angeles, we thought his career was going to go by the wayside. It's rejuvenated now in Detroit.
Yeah.
Because I think finally ownership there in Detroit has finally realized, oh, we have a football team.
Mm-hmm.
We need to turn it around, and that's exactly what they've done. And this is a massive first test tonight on the road against Kansas City in probably, I'm going to say, the most hostile atmosphere in the National Football League at Arrowhead Stadium.
Isn't it still?
I believe
the
it is
record
still
for the largest stadium in the loudest stadium in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what they're up against tonight. KC only 4.5-point favorites in Vegas, which is a stunning revelation. The over/under is 53.5. Not saying I'm going to be betting on anything here because we are in the Lone Star Stadium.
The over/under is 53.5.
Yes.
So at least 35 of that is going to Kansas City.
Yes. And
If
then,
probably not at least 40 is going to Kansas City. No disrespect to the Lions, but
and it's going to be great.
let's be real, it's
gonna
Patrick
be-
Mahomes.
And it's going to be decent weather for them, too.
Yeah.
They're looking 87 degrees at kick.
I think the main thing that, before we even get to the game, the main thing we have to look for is Travis Kelce even playing?
Yes.
Because he had the knee tweak a couple days ago in practice.
And it wasn't just a tweak.
It was a potential ACL scare. They've said
I
since,
think
apparently, according to whoever, yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever it was, that
Shefty.
it probably was Schefter, that they, based on the exams, it does not look like an ACL tear. It looks like it is still intact. I think it's a matter of a bruised knee and a hyperextension, if I'm not mistaken, according to the reports. So now it matters for me because I had Travis Kelce on my fantasy team as of last night, so I had to figure out, is he playing? Yeah, I know you want to get into it. Just say it.
And
just come on.
Drafted him first.
Because he's the best tight end in the league.
I know he's the best tight end in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But if he hyperextended his knee and the damage is a little bit worse, he's not going to play for the first 6 weeks.
I will still have him on my bench and put Dallas Goedert with Jalen Hurts as his quarterback in the starting lineup for
I'm
going
to
to
love if you go 2-5 in those first few weeks without Travis Kelce, and you're going to look back and wonder, Well, I probably should have drafted somebody else.
No, I'm good. I'm good with my pick because of the fact that it's Travis Kelce.
Okay.
He's got Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback. And, yeah, there's other options like Christian McCaffrey, for example, which I usually go running back first round. But tight end is always, and I assume most fantasy owners, my worst position out of every position I usually draft.
Right, because
So I'll get the guarantee. Now, I hated where I was in the draft because, as I said, somehow I'm going to always end up either at the beginning or the end of every round in a snake draft because it always happens, always on ESPN. And sure enough,
there it was.
number one pick in the draft.
So 20 hours ago, Adam Schefter tweeted out, or 20 hours at the time of this recording, tight end Travis Kelce, who suffered a bone bruise to his knee at Tuesday's practice, is being listed as questionable for tonight's game against the Lions. So he's got the Q tag on him. If I'm Kansas City, I feel like you need to play this smart. You have a generational talent at tight end. You need to rest him tonight against Detroit. Because looking at who you go up against in week 2, let's see if that's a better matchup. You're on the road to Jacksonville, and I think that's a pretty decent matchup. So rest him, see how he feels in practice throughout the week, and then gauge if you're going to roll him out there week 2 against Jacksonville.
Yeah, and, it would be nice to have Kelce out there, obviously, for this first game. They're, according to reports, looks like they're doing an exam this morning to see if he's going to actually, they're going to do a morning workout with him to determine if he's even going to be able to play, and that's according to Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. Looking at it, and at the time of this recording, there's no update as of right now.
No.
But obviously, they have to release an inactive list ahead of the game tonight, which will probably come out by, a couple hours before the ball game.
I would say so, yes.
So for a lot of fantasy owners like myself, that'll really be the determination of, is Kelce actually going to play? I think we're all kind of waiting to see. And granted, I don't feel like it's going to make much of a difference. I still think Kansas City is probably going to easily take care of business in this game just because they're at home to start the season. Mm-hmm. It's a Super Bowl unveiling. It's another trophy. It's another banner for the Mahomes era. They've got everything on their side.
They do. And so I think that it's going to be it will be a Kansas City win tonight. I think the Lions will put up a fight in the first half, and then Kansas City will make their adjustments for the second half and take care of things. I think it's a 34-20 win tonight for Kansas City.
Yeah. Let's take a look now before we really get into our division by division previews. Let's look at some of the primetime games, right? Obviously, Thursday night, tonight isn't on Amazon because it's the kickoff. It's always on NBC. But starting next week, the Thursday night football game, Vikings at the Eagles, is the first Thursday on Prime Video game of the season. You look at some other matchups. You've got Broncos versus Chiefs in Week 6 in AFC West showdown there. You've got the Giants and the Niners in Week 3 on Prime Video. You've got the new situation with the Buccaneers at quarterback, I believe in Mayfield, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is the Baker.
Going into Buffalo in Week 8. You've got the Panthers taking on the Bears in Week 10. Bengals and Ravens in Week 11 for an AFC North showdown. Right after that, you've got the Dolphins going to the Jets in Week 12. You've got another matchup, AFC West, Chargers and Raiders in Week 15. So that's really the Thursday night matchups. You look at the Sunday night games this season. Obviously, you've got the one night, Lions and Chiefs. And then on Sunday, Cowboys and the Giants. Because always the Giants will win on Sunday Night Football in New York at whatever the stadium in New Jersey is.
MetLife?
There you go, that one. Yeah, that whatever thing we're going to call it.
East Rutherford?
It looks so boring. I'm sorry. Like, I get it's a neutral stadium. It just looks boring. It really does.
Renovations are a wonderful concept.
Yes, they are. Some other matchups next week, Sunday Night Football, Week 2. Dolphins at the Patriots to see Mac Jones' team since Bailey Zappe's now on the practice squad because that was a move that happened. Steelers, Raiders. You got Chiefs, Jets. I think is going to be a very, very high-profile game going into New York or New Jersey. Mahomes versus Rodgers now in the same conference for the first time. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch in Week 4. You've got, just kind of skimming through the rest of Sunday night, Ravens, Chargers I think is going to be a good matchup out in Week 12.
Herbert versus Jackson.
Going out to Los Angeles in SoFi. Then you've got the Eagles, Cowboys, Week 14, because, of course, you have to have almost every game in the NFC whatever, the NFC East, basically, in prime time Sunday night, because that's always how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think a matchup that it's a doubleheader for Week 16. I think probably the best primetime doubleheader that week. Bengals Steelers as a 4:30 kick on NBC, and then on Peacock only at 8 o'clock, Bills at the Chargers. That could be a game that might decide a top 2 seed for the Buffalo Bills.
That and it could also really that Bengals Steelers game that could decide the AFC North that day.
That could.
So things to think about when you look at what's coming up this season. A lot of great games on national television, and of course the Texans don't land any game on primetime this year.
Probably shouldn't this year. Let's be honest.
Now
There are games that could flex. I think starting Week 12 or Week 14,
the flexes
the
start
Monday
coming
Night
out.
Football at least, or I think just in general they start. So as they said in the Monday Night Football schedule release months ago, the duds will go away, as said by the ESPN talent, live on air. That was fun. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. And finally, kind of looking through the Monday night slate of games, Bills at Jets for this first week, Monday Night Football on ESPN, ABC, ESPN2, ESPN Plus, and ESPN Deportes. That's a lot.
Two's the Manning cast, right?
Yeah. They don't have a Manning cast for every game, but that is one of the Manning casts. Then you got the doubleheader in Week 2 and Week 3.
Sure.
ESPN and ESPN Deportes is Saints at Panthers. And then, this is Week 2. And then Browns at Steelers, ABC and ESPN Plus. So they're splitting up the networks, the family of networks. Basically, same thing here with Week 3. You've got, what am I thinking here? You've got Eagles at Buccaneers, ABC, ESPN 7:15, 8:15, ESPN Deportes, Rams at Bengals, which should be a very good matchup. Stafford against Burrow, a Super Bowl rematch of 2 years ago. This one in Cincinnati, though. And then for whatever reason, Week 4, they have a Sunday morning ESPN game. It's an ESPN Plus exclusive. Falcons at Jaguars. That may be an international game.
It's at Wembley.
It's at Wembley, so that's the international game, which I'm surprised is not on NFL Network like it has been the last couple of years. And then you've got the Monday night game that week, Seahawks at Giants. Kind of skimming through the rest of the Monday night schedule. Broncos versus Bills in Week 10. That should be a good one. Super Bowl rematch Week 11 at Arrowhead. Eagles, Chiefs, Week 11, Monday Night Football. And just kind of going through the rest of the schedule, it's not that there isn't other great games happening, but those are really the marquee games, at least in my opinion, when it comes to this season. I think a underrated matchup, though, that could be a good one. Week 8, Jimmy Garoppolo and the Raiders heading to Ford Field to face off against Jared Goff and the Lions in Week 8. I think that could be an underrated good matchup.
Could be a game that decides who gets a wild card and who doesn't.
Potentially. So quick holiday games here before we get out of the primetime slot. Thanksgiving Day, Packers at the Lions at Ford Field. That game on Fox. Commanders at Cowboys, an NFC East showdown in Arlington. That's a CBS game. Then you've got the Niners at the Seahawks on NBC
That night.
in Seattle. Then the Christmas Day games. Because actually, if you remember, there should be a game on Black Friday, if I'm not mistaken. Thought there was. I think it's an ESPN game. Either way.
Take a look. That's Week 12, you said?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. Black Friday, Miami at New York on Prime Video.
There you go.
Taking on the Jets.
So, on Prime Video, not ESPN like I originally thought. But Christmas Day, Las Vegas at Kansas City, a CBS and Nickelodeon simulcast.
Woo.
Giants and Eagles, another NFC showdown on Fox in Philly. Ravens and Niners, that should be a decent matchup on ABC.
Rematch of the Super Bowl 10 years ago.
And that is your holiday games, if you will.
And technically, Christmas Eve fits in there, but that lands on a Sunday this year.
Mhm.
So a brunt of the ball games will be on Christmas Eve, the one in prime time being New England at Denver on the NFL Network.
So now looking at the division by division here, as we just cross over the hour threshold here on the KSAM Sports Podcast. Kind of going division by division. We'll start in the AFC because that's what we're most familiar with, being Texans fans. That's
Right.
what we've grown up in our whole life. Let's start out in the East. It's the Bills' division to lose.
It is.
But the Dolphins are making a case. They're
They-
making a case. They've got a great roster last year. Tua, as long as,
As long as he's healthy.
he's healthy, hopefully he is. Obviously, a lot of scary injuries last year for him, multiple concussions. Hopefully he's good and ready to go for this year and doesn't have any, continuing. I mean, he probably does with the developing CTE, I would assume,
Right.
from all the concussions he's getting, as does every football player. But long as he's healthy and the rest of this roster, seems to be in place like it does, Dolphins could make a run at the Bills for the division. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's really going to depend on the Stephon Diggs situation. He's come out and said, according to reports, that he's just focused on trying to win ball games. He's not focused on contract talks right now. He's not focused on trying to leave the Bills and go to a different team, free agency, all that fun stuff that happened in the offseason. So, really, it's the Bills' division to lose. The Patriots, I think, can make a run. I think the only other team, at least for me this season, is going to depend on what Aaron Rodgers and the Jets do, how that starts out.
That's the black sheep of the division, if you will. We don't know what's going to happen just yet because we haven't seen Aaron Rodgers outside of preseason games, and that's not a great way to gauge it either.
No.
So it will depend on this first game coming up for him this weekend, and that first game, his first test as a Jet, is in front of a national audience against Buffalo. You're at home, but he knows full well how Buffalo has been. They have been the standard of the AFC East the last couple of years post Brady.
Yeah.
For New England, this is the make or break year. We talked about make or break with Keegan Shoemaker earlier on in the podcast. This is make or break with Mac Jones.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't figure it out this year, not only is Mac Jones on the hot seat, dare I say Bill Belichick's on the hot seat.
I mean, I feel like he's already on the hot seat. Because you look at it, obviously he's still, as far as I understand it, he's still general manager as well as head coach.
Mhm.
I don't think that title's been given up unless I missed a report somewhere.
I don't think so.
But, this really is Bill Belichick's team. And I think he's still in the situation of, how do I replace Brady? How do I replace the greatest quarterback of all time?
And
Mac Jones ain't it,
No.
obviously.
you tried with Jimmy Garoppolo,
Mm-hmm.
and that did not work out very well. He went on to be successful elsewhere.
He did.
And then now you have Mac
Mhm.
Jones. And, of course, Jones is carrying that stigma with him that Alabama quarterbacks do not translate to the NFL,
I'm a very big proponent in that one, yes.
i.e. A.J. McCarron.
Yeah.
So that's the big question surrounding New England because I think he's got good pieces around him.
He does.
Ramondre Stevenson's a great running back. And then you got a good receiver.
They've got a
core.
two-headed monster out there
Yes.
at the backfield.
Well, of course, because they got Zeke, too.
Right.
So they have that going for them, and that's, I'm sure, what they're going to lean on a lot this year, especially in divisional games.
They're going to have to.
But Mac's got to make plays with his arm.
He does.
And if
I wasn't confident after last season, or actually even heading into last season, about his play. And even heading into this year, I'm less confident.
if he doesn't make plays with his arm this year, dare I say, I think New England may finish in the bottom of the division.
I'm going to be honest. I'm expecting them to finish in the bottom of the division. I'm expecting it to be Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Patriots. That's how I'm looking at it.
And if you look at it simply through a football lens, that is stunning
It is.
to see New England at the bottom of the AFC East.
It is, because for a while, you remember, it was usually Patriots, Jets, Dolphins,
Bills.
Bills. And that's usually how it went, especially during the Mark Sanchez era, where it was Brady versus Sanchez for the top of the East title.
And then the Dolphins had just gotten Tannehill, and the Bills had a rotating carousel of E.J. Manuel and C.J. Anderson.
Yeah.
So those were the dark days for the Bills. But now they have their guy in Josh Allen, who no one expected to be what he is now.
Not coming out of the University of Wyoming now.
As a highly touted quarterback now in the NFL, but not, let alone going into college. Remember, Wyoming was the only D1 school that offered him.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, he took it. And then took it and ran with it.
Right.
But then had his struggles coming into the NFL, and now he has become, one of the star quarterbacks, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL at large. I mean, come on. He's on the Madden cover this year. So, now granted, I know that has its stigmas tied to it as well, but
please stay healthy. You're on my fantasy team. You're my number 1 quarterback.
you're number 2 on one of my other leagues. So, like you said, this is Buffalo's division to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything less than a division win and a resounding division win, I think is a loss for them this year. But they can't sleep on Miami because Miami has gotten a lot of pieces with a healthy Tua and a healthy receiver core of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think Waddle has a Q tag going into this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. The Dolphins, looking at the games this weekend, of course, the Bills and the Jets play each other on Monday Night Football. The Dolphins are on the road at SoFi in Inglewood taking on the Chargers, and then the Patriots are at home in Foxborough against the defending NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles. So all 3 games, not easy by any stretch. Granted, the Bills and Jets play each other, but that's not an easy game for either of them.
Quickly moving on here to the West. Chiefs. That's the only answer. Just Chiefs.
I think that's all we got to say.
Yeah, Chiefs.
It is going to be the Chiefs. If you want my opinion on what the order is going to be, I think it's Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, Broncos.
Okay.
Sorry, no. Flip Broncos, Raiders. Raiders will be at the bottom, I think.
You don't think the Jimmy G experience will work?
I don't think it's going to work at all.
You don't think Brady looking over his shoulder as a part owner is going to help him out?
No, I don't think that's going to do anything.
It's so funny.
They couldn't do. I personally think Derek Carr is a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo.
1,000%.
So and they couldn't win with Derek.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes you think they're going to win with Garoppolo?
Because Tom Brady's in the front office now.
I don't think that's going to matter. I think
it's the Raider way.
The reason, and the only reason I say that Denver's going to be above them, I think Denver will be only slightly above Las Vegas.
Now here's the real question: how many interceptions will Russell Wilson throw this season in comparison to the amount of bathrooms in his mansion?
I don't.
He almost had the same number last season. He just barely passed it at the end of the year.
But my question in Denver is not so much about Russell Wilson. I know he's talented, but I know he's starting to get to the back end of his career.
Mm-hmm.
The question in Denver is Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm.
How you've seen what he did in New Orleans for so many years and saw a lot of success there. Granted, you had a generational quarterback in Drew Brees helping you along the way.
The shortest guy ever to throw 5,000 plus yards every year.
But you also have another guy that's very similar to Brees and Russell Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to benefit Peyton in the long run. I don't think they're going to make anything with it. I'd see them maybe going 7-10 at best.
So with that situation, and kind of picking back off of that, the Sean Payton thing, I still think this season there's more to lose for Russell Wilson than there is Sean Payton.
There is.
Not just saying that because obviously, the obvious. Payton just got hired.
Mm-hmm.
I would say you're not going to fire him after the first year, but look what the Texans did the last 2 years.
Right.
So, the thing is, this really is, to me, it's not a make or break year for Russell Wilson, but this is a situation of if he can't figure it out this year, then if you're the top brass of the, in other words, if you're Walmart for the Denver Broncos, because that's now who owns the Denver Broncos, you have to look at it and go, what do we do with Russell Wilson if he can't figure it out this year? I don't think a third place finish is going to keep his job there. I think you have to finish second at worst to make it go, okay, maybe he's all right here.
He's got to cook up something great.
He has to. So, But yeah, Chiefs easily out of the West.
Lions play the Chiefs, of course, tonight. The Broncos are going to be facing the Raiders at home. And then, like I mentioned, Dolphins are on the road against the Chargers. Okay, AFC North. We'll wait till we get to the South. The North. Bengals, Browns, Steelers, Ravens. Obviously, Cincinnati, I feel like, is going to be at the top. Solely because of just
you would think
who they have around Joe Burrow there. I know Burrow had an injury scare in the preseason at training camp, but it wasn't as severe as they thought it was. Thought it was going to be. So it looks like he's okay. The rest of the division kind of just blends together.
I think the main question for me,
how's Lamar going to play?
Yeah, that's part of it. Because obviously now he's back with the Ravens after a very, very toxic offseason. But now you have some better weapons. I say better. You have Odell Beckham Jr., who's definitely in the latter part of his career.
He is.
But he was the main piece into getting Lamar Jackson back. That I think is a for sure. I think that's an obvious to anybody who watches football. He was basically the main piece to getting Lamar Jackson.
You gave him a prime weapon.
You did. So you look at that and you go, okay, look at the Ravens situation. And to me, it's not a comparison of the Steelers. It's a comparison of the Browns. I think those two are going to be the middlemen of the division. I honestly think the Steelers will finish last.
I could see that.
It's just a matter of, do the Steelers somehow pull off a 5-6 game winning streak at the end of the season to stay above 500 and keep Tomlin's impressive record intact or not?
Right.
Like they did last year.
Because they're still going through the whole thing. Like, how do we navigate post-Roethlisberger?
Which should be easy as long as you have a healthy quarterback.
Right, and you have small hands Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, exactly.
Who you already have an advantage of having him had already been in the city for the last couple of years because he played at Pitt.
Right.
And you bring him in.
It should have been an easier, not an easy, but an easier transition for him.
I feel like it will be. Because, granted, remember, he didn't start at the beginning of last season. He started down the stretch of the year in a time when Pittsburgh, was not where they should have been. But he's got solid pieces around him. You got Najee Harris in the backfield, George Pickens in the wide receiver core, and a great tight end in Pat Freiermuth. So he's got weapons. But I don't think they compare to the days of, Big Ben throwing to Hines Ward.
And having the bus behind you.
The bus behind you, and then throwing to Antoine Randall and Heath Miller.
Yeah.
You don't have that. Those days of Pittsburgh football
are
long gone.
Oh, yeah.
Pittsburgh is in what we describe in the broadcasting business, a soft rebuild.
Yes, a very soft rebuild. Now, you have to remember with Kenny Pickett as well, he's the starter. He's number one on the depth chart. But he has to remember, he's not a solid number one. Somehow, Mitchell Trubisky is still in the NFL, and he's sitting right behind him at number 2, waiting for him to mess up and for Trubisky to get his shot. Now, I say that. Mason Rudolph is the third string. So, somehow he's still in the league.
He's here because Myles Garrett didn't kill him. That's why he's still in the league.
Basically. I think it's just a pity party at this point for him because he's the third string and not on the practice squad.
Right.
But the point being...
But the fact is, they got experience.
They do.
Behind Pickett.
They do, and that's the thing, is Pickett has to be aware that, yes, he's a starter, but it's not his team. It's nowhere close to being his team. Yeah, like, he has to look over his shoulder and realize Trubisky's right there behind him, and he's ready to take his job. You have to remember, Trubisky was a starter for years.
Was he not the second overall pick?
He was, and he was a starter for Chicago for at least 2 years.
Then they realized this was dumb.
Right, and then they got Justin Fields, and things are better. They're not as good as they can be, but they're better.
Much better.
They're much better. So I think, like you said, it's the Bengals at the top, and I'd probably say Ravens 2, Browns 3, Steelers 4. That's probably my order.
That's kind of where I was at.
Because with the Browns, it's going to be a matter of, and Deshaun Watson has come out,
Deshaun Watson!
And he said that he feels he's a better version of himself as far as a player goes than the 2020 Deshaun Watson. But he feels that he is a better version of himself player-wise than he was when he was with the Texans in 2020.
He looks more relaxed, I'll say that much.
I mean, yeah. now that he's not suspended for the first however bit of the season,
Mhm.
first 10, 12 weeks, whatever it was.
I mean, massages will do that for you.
So it's I'm not gonna laugh at that.
But anyway,
Yeah.
that's where that's I think that's how it's going to spill out. Ravens. I'm not going to say that the Ravens aren't going to compete for the division title. I think they will.
It'll be a neck and neck game. It'll probably be that Week 16 game that decides where the Bengals have to beat the Steelers in order to claim the division. It's probably what's going to happen.
But then again, stranger things happen in the AFC North.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, remember when the Browns made the postseason a couple of years ago? That stunned everybody. So weird things can happen, but I think this is the Bengals division for sure.
It is.
And now we get to the South.
The AFC suck.
Pretty much.
It's oddly enough, it's the Jaguars division to lose because everybody else in the division is horrible.
Yes.
Especially the Titans. That's why I'm putting them at 4.
Let's look at the quarterback situation across the board.
It is a very good quarterback division. Oddly enough.
It is, oddly enough. Trevor Lawrence in Duval.
The best quarterback in the division so far.
Yes. Which is weird to say when you look at how it was 5 years ago. And the Jaguars quarterback was Blake Bortles.
They took it to the AFC Championship game.
I know he did.
And lost because the refs had to give the Patriots the win.
They did. The Colts are going to be going with the project, Anthony Richardson. Good for him. We'll see how it goes. Texans, of course, going with Stroud. Just named a captain.
David Carr experience 2.0.
Yes.
The one thing I said to probably not do.
Okay, but let's think about this for a second. Besides Deshaun Watson, when was besides Watson and Carr?
Yeah.
They haven't done the whole rookie quarterback experience in their entire tenure.
No, but we saw what happened with him, with David Carr. Granted, I understand, completely different situation. It was an expansion team. I understand that.
I think the O-line's better than what Carr had.
I would hope so. Because your offensive line then came from 5 different teams. Granted, you had a Hall of Famer in Tony Baselli, the first ever pick by the Houston Texans.
Who never played it down for the Texans.
Exactly the point. So, you look at it, and I just, I want Stroud to do well. Now, I say that as somebody who said Texans should not take a quarterback. But I said if they do, I'd rather have Stroud over Young. For me, at least, because, yes, the adage is players from Bama don't translate. Players from Ohio State don't translate as well. Let's be honest. It hasn't been a good track record for them as well.
Is there a quarterback? Is there a quarterback from, let's say, the big 3? Bama, Georgia, Ohio State.
Yeah.
Who was the last one to really translate out of all 3 of those schools?
The only one that's even close right now is Tua.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Well, and because I know Jalen Hurts had a stint in Alabama, but he came into the NFL from Oklahoma.
I don't consider him an Alabama quarterback. I consider him an Oklahoma quarterback.
It's crazy to think about, just brief touch on Hurts, that him, Mac Jones, and Tua were on the Bama depth chart
at the
same exact time, and all 3 of them are now starting quarterbacks in the NFL.
That
should tell you everything about Nick Saban's recruiting tactics.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very good. But, for me, it's...
But then there's Ohio State.
Yeah.
And their track record of bringing in quarterbacks. You think of Craig Krenzel from many years ago. Braxton Miller, who was, granted, great college quarterback.
Yeah.
And he eventually ended up on the Texans.
They did.
But as a wide receiver.
Yes. Yes, he did.
So here's this is going to be the question about Stroud. Is he finally going to break that mold of rookie quarterbacks, not only coming from out of Ohio State, but rookie quarterbacks coming into the NFL, into the Texans? Is he finally going to break that?
And it's a weird position for him, too, because of the fact that Ohio State hasn't had a rookie start week 1 for a few years, for a good bit. Usually their quarterbacks, when they come into the league, they're the backup that's waiting for their opportunity to start. So the fact that he's getting the start week 1 is
it's monumental.
It's impressive. It's monumental, but it puts a lot more pressure on him, I think, because of the fact that now it's like, okay, now I have to go make something out of this. I don't get to have time to work into it. I'm going into the fire and facing Lamar Jackson week 1.
Yeah.
That's That's a tough ask out of CJ Stroud. I think that a lot of people are going to have to limit their expectations week 1 of him, of Anthony Richardson as well for the Colts, especially with that situation because Jonathan Taylor's holding out right now for a trade. He's trying to get Billy on a different team.
And it helps. He's on the PUP list for these first 4 weeks.
Exactly. So I think people are going to have to limit their expectations on especially those two, but mainly since we're talking about the Texans right now, CJ Stroud. I think they're going to have to limit their expectations for these first 4 games because it's a tough slate for these first 4 games.
Yeah, looking at the Texans, you are in Baltimore this weekend on CBS. Of course, a noon game. You all your games this year are noon games outside of the Broncos game at the beginning of December. That's a 3:05 game.
Yay, afternoon!
And there's one game that doesn't have a time on it yet. That's the season finale with the Colts.
Yeah, because that's all flexed.
Yes. So you go Ravens, home against the Colts, at Jacksonville, and then you're home against Pittsburgh.
It's not it's not the toughest, but it's not easy by any means.
Dare I say, I think we can be 2-2 out of those 4.
You can.
I think you and granted, both of those wins coming at home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're going to win against Baltimore on the road.
No, you should not.
You're not going to go into Jacksonville, probably a red hot Jacksonville team when you see them in week 3.
Because Trevor Lawrence has figured it out.
Yes, he has. Pittsburgh, like we mentioned earlier, just a few moments ago, they haven't figured it all out yet. You can easily be 2-2. You look a little even beyond that. You played the entire NFC South in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Weeks 5 through
8.
9. There's a bye week in there.
Oh yeah.
Weeks 5 through 9.
Mm-hmm.
You're at Atlanta. You're home against the Saints. You're at Carolina. Then you go to you play Tampa Bay here at home, who is a rebuilding franchise. Carolina. I'm excited for that matchup. Stroud versus
Why
Young.
is that not a primetime game?
I wish it was.
Why is 1A versus 1B not the primetime game?
I know.
Why is that not Sunday Night Football?
See,
I want Mike Tirico on that game.
I find it intriguing that they
not Greg Gumbel.
That they go road home, road home, road home, road home, road because they have to play Cincinnati after the Bucks, and then let's place 3 straight in NRG. The schedule's weird, but I'm looking up and down this schedule. There's only really a few games where I look at it for the Texans and I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to lose that game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few games in here I'm like, we can win.
And, fans have to remember something that, last year there were plenty of games. I want to say there was, 5 or 6 games last year. The Texans were in a position to win and had the lead at one point in the final 3 minutes of the ball game, i.e. the Dallas Cowboys game.
Ugh.
Where they gave up a last-minute touchdown to lose it because they couldn't figure out how to do a 2-minute defense.
See,
for some reason.
I knew I wanted to tank last year because I wanted to get a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only game I wanted to win.
Yeah, same. No, same. I was so happy. Granted, fantastic ball game, and every Cowboys fan will admit to you, it should have never been that close. The Cowboys completely screwed up that game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not me being a Texans fan saying that. That's everybody in the NFL saying that, including Cowboys fans.
And we know a good chunk of them.
Exactly. Some of them are our coworkers. So, Luke. But
yeah,
you look at this division, right? And in the grand scheme of things, the Titans are a mess. The only consistent thing about them is Derrick Henry getting hurt and Mike Vrabel being their head coach. And the fact that in 2-3 years they're going to have the new Microsoft headquarters at their stadium.
Pretty much.
/ a greenhouse apartment complex. But otherwise, it's Jacksonville's division to lose in a very weak division. Now, I'm not trying to say that to discount Jacksonville because they're a good roster. They got a good quarterback. And now, if you remember, they've got a new number 1 receiver out there. They've got a prime target out there for Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley, who's now off of the suspension for the whole gambling thing that now 7 different NFL players are all suspended for it this offseason. But, point being, it's going to be a good offense for the Jaguars. I think in the early season for Houston, it's going to be a matter of how quickly can the tandem duo of Damian Pierce and Devin Singletary work out of the backfield? Because that for them is going to set up the rest of the offense.
Yep.
And how is Dalton Schultz going to be implemented in this return to the West Coast offense? I think those are the two things for the Texans offense. I think the defense is just putting in pieces and kind of figure it out while you plug and play. The Colts, I think once the Jonathan Taylor thing happens, I think then they can finally move forward. But I think also is Anthony Richardson, how much is he going to struggle? I don't think he's going to come out the gates and be, oh my gosh, he's MVP candidate. That's why he's called a project.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take time, and I think Colts fans have to realize that it's going to take time for him to develop into the quarterback he needs to be, just like any rookie, but especially for him because he's not coming out as a Bryce Young type of talent. He's not coming out as a C.J. Stroud type of talent. He's got some work to do. He impressed at his pro day, but he's got some work to do. And then the Titans, yeah, they're on the back end of it. That's why they're building a stadium, so they can get fans to be excited about the team.
That's basically how they started.
Exactly.
So
Tannehill's really not it anymore. He's definitely on the back end. He is past where he should be playing.
And then you look at who's behind him.
Exactly. And Derrick Henry, hopefully he doesn't get hurt again, but kind of wait until that week 6 time when he gets hurt for the season. And then just the rest of the team is the rest of the team.
It is. So I think Jaguars.
I got Jaguars, Colts, Texans, Titans.
I'm going to be gutsy.
Texans?
Jaguars, Texans, Colts, Titans, but we missed the postseason.
Oh, I would hope we miss the postseason. If we get to the postseason this year, I have to be careful what I say here.
Oh, don't worry. I've already made a massage joke on this thing. I think
No.
That's
I'm trying to say I'm putting down a quote unquote bet, if you will.
Okay.
If the Texans finish second and just miss the wild card by a game, I'm going to put a game there. I'm not going to do like a 3-game, thing because that could happen. If they miss the playoffs by a game and finish second in the division, I will, on this podcast, an exclusive for you here on the podcast, I will, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that's dangerous for my own health, but is safe for YouTube and for myself. I keep going back to eating worms, but I'm not doing that.
No, I might. We might have to ask the guys.
Yeah.
Well,
let us know in the comments if you got something.
That too. That and
Yeah.
I guess we can read. I'll ask Colton from the item.
Yeah.
I'll ask Luke and Colin. See what punishment we can do for you if the Texans finish second in the division and miss the wild card by a game.
I'm putting a consolation here. I'm not wearing a Cowboys jersey for Luke. I'm not doing that.
Okay.
Rigo, I'm not doing that.
Okay.
Sorry, not sorry.
There you have that.
But yeah, so now flipping to the NFC side, we'll quickly roll through it here because we spent 28 minutes talking about the AFC. NFC East. It's always somehow the most competitive division in the NFC every single year.
Which is crazy because there's a team called Washington in there.
Yeah, and when you look at their Google logo, it looks like somebody slanted the W key and just done. With
Yes.
a little bit of a smear in there. But it's easy. It's the Eagles.
Yes.
That's really it.
It's the most talented team in the division.
It's just a matter of, are they going to have one wild card team out of that division?
Or are they going to have two?
Or are they going to have two? Because I think last year they had two, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Cowboys and the Giants both
So,
in the postseason.
Do we see that again this year?
Maybe. If, pardon my language here, if Dallas gets their head out of their ass, that's what it's really going to come down to.
Right. If Dak can figure it out. Not saying he's not a good quarterback. He's a good quarterback.
We have used the term make or break a lot on today's podcast. Here's the first time that it's actually going to be really a make or break. This is a make or break year for Dak Prescott.
It is. I think if he can't figure it out and win a second-round playoff game, because I think that's the level they need at this point to fully believe in Dak Prescott, is him winning a second-round playoff game.
You have been...
Which means you have to get to it.
Yeah, well, they got to it last year, got embarrassed by San Francisco. That last play call, Kellen Moore, I think, is a great coordinator. He's going to be, I don't remember where exactly he went off the top of my head, but I know he's an OC somewhere else in the NFL now. Great offensive coordinator, smart guy. What the heck was that last play?
Los Angeles Chargers.
Okay, so he's with Herbert, who has actually shown semblance of long-term stability. So, but like I said, this is make or break for Dak. You have great pieces around you. You've got great receivers, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, who has been generational since high school. You've got, and Kevontae Turpin as well, a great running back in Tony Pollard that basically cut Ezekiel Elliott's legs out from under him.
Right.
So you've got talent around you. And a great defense, too. I will give credit where credit is due. Dallas's defense is really good. From top to bottom, from the front line and DeMarcus Lawrence to the linebackers with Leighton Vander Esch and to their secondary.
It's definitely not what it was 8 years ago, but that's also 8 years ago.
Right.
It is a good defense, especially for it, one, being an NFC East team, two, for it being in this division. It has definitely helped them win ball games, especially last year.
Yeah.
They're going to need a lot of that again this year.
So, but the big thing for Dallas is, how is Dak going to perform?
That's really the only question I have.
That is the question.
Because we all know Mike McCarthy should not be a head coach in the NFL anymore.
No, he shouldn't. How do I think this division is going to spill out? This is my professional opinion. Eagles win the division, hands down.
I don't think anybody's
Dare I say,
that.
they may get to 15 wins this year.
They're probably going to be the NFC representative again.
I think so.
I say that it's very hard to go to back-to-back.
If Dak does not perform up to par, the Giants are going to get second. Because they've done a good job with this rebuild around Daniel Jones. Was that a very questionable draft pick a few years ago? Absolutely.
Yes, it still is.
6th overall. You probably could have gotten him with the second first-round pick that you had. Dare I say, maybe the second-round pick that you had.
Right.
But they've owned up for it. And they've actually gotten a lot better, i.e., last year making the postseason. Then you have Washington. I'm intrigued to see how Sam Howell does.
I've got him at 4th.
I think
I don't have hope for the Commanders.
I think they will be 4th.
Yeah.
But they're going to win some games this year.
I mean, yeah, it's the NFL.
But
you have to win games if you're in the NFC.
So.
But I don't have hope for the Commanders.
I don't either. I mean,
the only hope that I have for that franchise is the fact that Dan Snyder's no longer the owner.
Right.
Their stadium is still leaking pipes of sewage at the moment.
It is.
So I really don't have hope for what this team can do, especially in this division.
But my big thing is, if Dak doesn't perform up to standard, the Cowboys will finish 3rd and very well may not make the postseason.
I could see that. I think that kind of depends on, for me, I think that's going to depend on the NFC West, which we'll get to here in just a little bit.
Yes.
On how that shapes out. But yeah, I think I'm kind of on the same sentiment with you. I've got Eagles 1, Giants 2, who might sneak into the wild card by like a game. Cowboys 3rd and Commanders 4th. Okay. I think it'll depend on, again, how the NFC West shakes up, because I think that's the best team or the best division that'll contend with the East when it comes to multiple wildcard teams or not. But yeah, I think that's how I've got the East laid out. So
let's go to the West. Let's just go on that lateral plane. The West: Rams, Cards, Niners, and Seahawks. Not in that order. This is a weird division to gauge this year. I know we base a lot of team success on quarterbacks because that's the heart and soul of the team. Let's just look through that real quick.
Yeah.
Rams, Matthew Stafford. Cardinals, Kyler.
Are we sure about that?
Yeah. Niners, Brock Purdy. Seahawks, Geno Smith. Dare I say that Geno Smith may make a case this year to be the best quarterback in the West?
He probably already.
It's him and Stafford.
Yeah, I was going to say Stafford's there. The Super Bowl basically gives him Hall of Fame status at this point.
It does.
Very, very late ballot, not first ballot, but
But it
almost the veteran committee.
But it took
push in,
him
but
getting out of Detroit to be able to finally show who he is.
Newsflash: I think it'll take anybody getting out of Detroit to see who they really are.
Right.
I say that with the exception of Jared Goff. It took him
Right.
getting there,
Mm-hmm.
but
It took him leaving L.A. to go to Detroit and get
Right.
better, and it took
and watch the team that he built win a Super Bowl without
Yes.
him. But but yeah, like you said, it's a weird division. Kyler Murray is a interesting question mark, and I think probably the biggest question mark in that division, and that's with Geno Smith being in there. Because yes, he's coming off of a Comeback Player of the Year award. He had an amazing season last year. Can he keep that up, though?
Yeah.
He's got good talent around him on the outside, but can he keep that up?
It's crazy to think about how much has changed in that division since it was at its prime. With the Rams, while they were still in St. Louis,
Sam Darnold.
with the success they had, some of the success they had, and then when they moved to L.A., bringing in Jared Goff.
You mean the St. Louis Jeff Fishers?
Yes, the Cardinals with
Yeah.
Carson Palmer.
Yeah, that was
when
an
they were
era.
at their peak.
And then going to Kurt Warner.
Warner was before
Oh yeah.
Palmer,
Yeah.
and then you bring in Kyler.
Yeah.
Niners with Alex Smith,
Mm-hmm.
and then Kaepernick.
Yep.
And then that good era you had with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yep.
And then, of course, the Seahawks with Russell Wilson and the Legion of Boom.
Yeah.
That's not this division anymore.
No, not even close.
It's a shell of what it once was.
Yes.
Now, they could some of these teams, like I'm thinking, if Brock Purdy is what he was last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm banking on him being that, that's why I have the Niners winning the West.
Yeah.
The Rams will get second and get a wild card. I think the Seahawks miss out on the postseason this year.
Mm-hmm.
I will be stunned if the Cardinals even win a game.
So they'll win games. They're not the Browns from Hard Knocks.
Right.
They'll win football games. But
Oh, they do have the Texans on their schedule, so I guess that's a plus.
they will be fourth in this division.
Yes.
That's not a question, I think, in most people's minds. I think it's a matter of, for me, it's the Cardinals 4, the Seahawks 3. I think, well, they rode a high last year. I think they're going to kind of mellow out just a little bit this year and get to 3. But this could be a division where the top 3 teams all have at least 9 wins.
Yeah.
It easily can be. Not saying that they're going to go under 500, get like 5 wins, and then have to rebuild again. But I think the main question in this division is, now that, you look at it, ever since the Super Bowl a couple years ago for the Rams, they've been on a slow and steady downward slide. It's a matter of waiting for these players to leave, because once they do, and the public reports have said it, and Sean McVay has kind of said it himself, once these core players are gone, he's gone, and he's going to go join TV somewhere.
Yeah.
How long can they win? I'm not necessarily saying that the Rams are the lock at the 1. I think the 49ers may have a good contention. Now, that's going to depend on how Mr. Irrelevant does in his second year of the league. He took the league by storm last year. And
Probably the most successful last pick in the draft of
it is.
all time.
Oh, no, 1,000% is.
and that's just saying him as a rookie.
Now, if he was fully healthy in that NFC Championship game, I'm with 49ers because I think they could have won that game. I think they probably would have won that game had Brock Purdy been healthy.
Now, would they have won the Super Bowl? Probably not.
No. Not against Mahomes.
No.
But it's a great story, but you have to look at the obvious. D'Amico Ryans is gone.
Yes.
Your defensive coordinator, we'll gladly take him back, but he's gone. Your defensive coordinator, one of the best coordinators in the NFL last year, over the last few years now, who had been building up to become a head coach, he's gone. The leader of that defense is now gone, as far as the coaching goes and the schemes and everything else gone. How did they build off that? Because obviously it's going to be a little bit different of a defense They still have some of the talent, but they did lose starters.
They did. The big thing is you replaced D'Amico Ryans, one of the best minds in football, with Steve Wilkes, who is a failed head coach. He coached the Cardinals in 2018.
That's an era I forget.
He went to become a defensive coordinator with the Browns in 19. Then he fell out of the NFL ranks completely and was the DC at Mizzou. And then he was with Carolina last year. He was the interim head coach with them towards the end of last season. And now he's the DC in San Francisco.
Now, the Niners did just get Bosa on a massive deal.
Yes.
5-year, over $100 million deal to make him, I think, the highest paid per average annual value for that position or something like that.
Something like that.
But point being, you do have Bosa back, but is it going to be enough to get past the Rams? I think is the big question when it comes to this division, because you look at the division last year, and yes, the Rams didn't do great. They went 5-12. The Niners went 13-4. The Seahawks went 9-8 and made the postseason, just barely on the tiebreaker situation. I don't know why. I feel like the Rams should be better this year. I think it's going to honestly come down to the Niners and the Rams. Now, Niners are the heavy favorite. I think that's kind of what everybody's saying.
For sure.
But I don't think it's a lock. I think somehow the Rams may figure something out, and I think it's going to be a three-headed monster for the title of the West.
Very well could be, but only time will tell in the ball games that are to come. Cardinals take on the Commanders, which can that be a tank bowl right out of the gate? If you think about it. Seahawks play the Rams on as America's Game of the Week on Fox. And then the 49ers are on the road in Pittsburgh in a noon game. So we'll see how that pans out. All right, 2 divisions left. Let's roll through them real quick. The North, you got the Bears, the Lions, the Pack, and the Vikings. This is another one of those divisions where it's kind of like the West, and you're like, really? I feel this way about the entire NFC. Because we're going to get to the South here in a second. I'm going to be like, oh my goodness.
Just somebody have a winning record this year.
Like, for real.
For the South,
It's like the AL Central in baseball.
God.
But for the North, I'm going to be bold in saying this. I think the Bears win the North.
And I think you're a lunatic. You think they're going to go from 3-14 last year, bottom of the pit, to beating a 9-8 Lions and a 13-4 Minnesota Vikings?
Yes.
Why?
Because I don't think the Vikings are going to be as good this year. Sure, you keep Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, but it's another one of those Dak Prescott situations. How's Kirk going to perform at quarterback? And you look at the pieces that they've put around in Chicago. You have a great running back in Khalil Herbert. You bring in a Chase Claypool to be a weapon for Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have everyone back on defense. I think this is the turnaround year for them. Because I say that because this reason. Yeah, are the Lions turning it around? Yes, they are. I think they're good for second. I have the Packers finishing last in the North this year. They're not good. I don't think Jordan Love's going to perform the way people are envisioning him to be in Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be Bears. I'll give the Vikes second. Lions will finish third. Packers fourth. This may be the division that actually has 2 wild cards come out of it with the Vikings and the Lions. It's going to be a dogfight.
So, yeah, no, I think the way that the division rolls out this year is the same as last year. This is the Vikings division to lose. You've got the Lions figuring it out, obviously, with last year's above 500 record and all that. But, yeah, no, I think, not saying Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Justin Fields, because we don't know about Jordan Love at all right now. But I do still I think it's going to be a battle for fourth place between those two sides. I really do. I still think it's going to be the same order. I think the Bears still have a lot to figure out, and I think the Packers will find some kind of magic run midway through the year, win 4 straight, and kind of put themselves at third. But I'm not as sold on with you as the Bears. I don't think the Bears find a way to magically add 10 wins in one season.
I'm not gonna
and overtake the 4-time Pro Bowler in Kirk Cousins, who threw for over 4,500 yards last year.
I just don't think it's his year. I genuinely don't think
He's
it's
coming
his
off
year.
back-to-back Pro Bowls at 33 and 34 years
The
old.
Pro Bowl means jack squat in
I don't
this,
care.
in
It's
this
the
era.
Pro Bowl. It's still a Pro Bowl selection.
I know it is, but I don't. You go to the Pro Bowl because you didn't make the Super Bowl. That's why you're in the Pro Bowl.
Oh, man.
And that's not even in that game they play anymore. It's a glorified 2-hand touch game.
Now, I will say, yes, Kirk Cousins' interceptions did double from the year before, from 7 to 14, but he's still the best quarterback in that division.
I agree. He's still, I'll give you that. He's the best quarterback in the division.
I don't see anybody overtaking him.
I don't think the pieces that they lost in this offseason is going to hurt Minnesota. You lost Dalvin Cook.
I mean, yeah.
You lost Adam Thielen.
Yeah.
Sure, you still have Justin Jefferson. I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a great tight end in Hawkinson, who's on almost every one of my fantasy teams. So
yeah, the
and that's only because I couldn't get Kelsey.
Right.
So,
but no, losing those two is a big thing. The Dalvin Cook thing still shocks me, with the way that whole thing, that just getting an extension and then going away after like year 2 of the 5-year extension.
The reason I have Green Bay at the bottom is because this is now the post-Rodgers Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
The really only bits of talent that I see on this offense, besides maybe Jordan Love, we'll see how he does, is Aaron Jones in the running back and Christian Watson as a wide receiver. That's all I see. And I only say Watson because we saw how he was at North Dakota State. And I think it'll translate to the NFL. He's now their number 1 wide receiver after they shelled everybody else out, losing Lazard and Randall Cobb to the Jets because they went over there with Rodgers. And then I look at their defense. Nobody really stands out outside of Rashawn Gary in the linebacker core and the rookie Van Ness. Nobody, and maybe Darnell Savage in the back in the secondary.
Yeah,
and Jair.
Yeah.
Nobody else stands out to me.
No, and I don't think anybody's expecting them to make the playoffs. The fact that they got as close as they did last year was kind of crazy for how much they struggled with Aaron Rodgers. But, they're not going to be the same team. They're probably going to be a little bit worse. At least a couple of wins worse, right? They're going to probably have a ceiling of 6 wins this year.
Yeah.
You have to remember this about the Bears, though, right? They lost 10 straight to end the season.
That's a good point.
That's hard. Like, I get you have an entire offseason to try to figure out a win, right? And the losses don't carry over, right? But that's hard. That's hard to do, losing 10 straight, and that's hard to just kind of bounce back
Where
from.
I think they'll have some struggles is on the defensive line. But I look at the talent that they brought in to be able to try and turn this team around. You have a 2-headed backfield of Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman. Texans legend Deontay Foreman. A wide receiver core of Darnell Mooney, who comes back from last year. You get DJ Moore to come over. And then Chase Claypool, who I know he's a media nightmare, but still very talented.
Right.
Where they're going to succeed on the offense outside of Fields is at tight end with Cole Kmet. Arguably, to me, in the NFC, top 5 tight end, behind maybe only Hawkinson, and George Kittle.
Right.
And you look at their defense. You bring in Yannick Ngakoue to help you out, and DeMarcus Walker, a linebacker core of Tremaine Edwards and another former Texan, Dylan Cole, who is now broken out in that role. And then you bring in mainstays in the defensive backs. You have Eddie Jackson still. And then that's the kind of area where I think they're going to struggle is in the secondary because you don't have a lot of great depth outside of Jackson. A lot of rookies, That's just my bold prediction on it. Is that they will have there's always a team every single year that kind of has that huge turnaround year from the previous year, and I think
Right.
that this year it's Chicago.
Yeah, I don't know. To quickly wrap up the North, like I said, I got Vikings 1, Lions 2, Packers 3, Bears 4. Just like the order last year, Vikings win the division. Lions probably grab a wild card, probably the wild card 3 spot or 2, whatever it is nowadays. But yeah, I don't think that I don't think the order, at least in my opinion, I don't feel like it's going to change. Quickly here, as we're nearing the 2-hour mark of the podcast.
It's been a while since we got into this point.
Yeah, I know, right? The NFC, please have a winning record. The NFC South, the Buccaneers winning the division last year at 8 and stupid 9. The Panthers, Saints, and Falcons all tied at 7 and 10 last year.
Yep.
No team really getting better except better quarterbacks now. Saints having Derek Carr as their starter. You have with Jameis Winston as the backup. So weird. Because you remember, eat a dub.
Yeah.
That was against the Saints, if I'm not mistaken. You got Bryce Young, rookie quarterback for Carolina. And then you got Baker Mayfield, who is a good starter in the NFL, leading the Buccaneers in their quote-unquote soft rebuild as a division winner. The Falcons are the Falcons. I think the best chance for this division is the Saints. I think they have the best chance of probably winning this division because they have the most veteran leader at quarterback. Now, Baker Mayfield for the Buccaneers isn't too far behind him, but I think their best shot for a team to win a division this year is the Saints. I don't think you have a one team that's a clear and cut favorite based on last year and how everybody was horrible, but Saints, I think, are the favorite when you just look at the general aspect of things with this division.
Right.
And I think the Bucs may be sitting there at 2. I got the Panthers at 3, waiting a year to kind of figure it out with Bryce Young, take this first year, figure some things out. If he does stellar, great for them.
Great.
I don't have them making the playoffs.
No.
Falcons are going to get worse. I think that's just the clear-cut thing.
Now, hear me out.
Okay.
I think Atlanta gets 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah, the quarterback situation in Atlanta is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Because you either go with Taylor Heineke, who we've seen has had some success.
Yeah.
In of all places, Washington. And Desmond Ridder.
Who currently is the starter according to the depth chart.
He got to learn over the last couple of years, over last year, learning the system. Yeah. So, and he was a great college quarterback in Cincinnati. I know that doesn't really translate to the NFL sometimes, but Cincinnati, though, it's not an Ohio State.
No.
He came from a group of 5.
Yeah.
So,
who's now a Power 5.
Yes, now is. Now you look at the pieces he has around him. You have a 2-headed backfield of Tyler Allgeier, and you have Cordero Patterson back there too, by the way. And then from Longhorn Nation, Bijan Robinson, who was your highly touted pick in the draft.
I think he's going to be the main key, and that's saying with Kyle Pitts as the starting tight end.
Yes. Where they're going to struggle this year is in the receiver core. Their best receiver is Drake London. Yeah. That's where they're going to have some trouble. Yeah. My reason for putting them 3rd is their front line in the defense. Grady Jarrett and Calais Campbell. They are going to be menaces on the defensive side. You have Bud Dupree in the linebacker core helping you along. And then in the secondary, where they may struggle, but they have some good pieces, you have Trey Flowers, Jesse Bates getting him over from Cincinnati. That was a big grab that I think a lot of people didn't really check. And then Jeff Okudah as well. The reason I have...
Don't forget A.J. Terrell.
And A.J. Terrell, too. So, yeah, there you go. They have a lot of great pieces defensively, and I think that's what's going to put them 3rd. The reason being, I think Carolina's going to struggle with Bryce Young right out of the gate. Yeah. Because he's trying... Because, remember, Bryce is 5'11". Most offensive linemen in the NFL are, 6'3", 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
You need to be able to see over the offensive line to be able to be successful in the NFL. I'm not saying that small quarterbacks have not been successful in the NFL. Look at Drew Brees. But I think he's going to have some struggles right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even saying because he's an Alabama quarterback.
Right.
And I know he's got a veteran leader right behind him on the depth chart and Andy Dalton to help him along. That's weird to think about, Andy Dalton in Carolina
The
blue.
Red Rifle.
But and he's got good pieces too, with Miles Sanders coming from Philly.
Yeah.
And then Thielen coming from Minnesota. It's a matter of is the chemistry going to happen right out of the gate, and I don't think it will be. And I think Carolina's going to find themselves in a hole early enough to where they're not going to be able to recover from.
Yeah.
That's why I have Atlanta third, Carolina fourth, but both missed the postseason.
Who's your division winner?
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
New Orleans first, Tampa Bay second. I think this is going to be the division again where the team that wins the division will be the only team that makes the playoffs out of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because
there isn't enough depth on each of these rosters to have multiple teams make the playoffs.
no, and just to briefly touch on Tampa Bay, you're going with Baker, who I know he has seen better days as a quarterback.
Yeah.
If there were any good days to begin with,
There were.
There were.
He took Cleveland to the playoffs.
I know.
He had the first win in over 400 days or something like that.
There's that. I'm tired.
Tired. I'm late.
Yes, but there's really not much depth offensively,
There isn't.
especially on that offensive line.
No. The depth left when Brady left the first time.
Yes.
And then again when he left the second time.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see how that plays out for them. But New Orleans, I think, is finally going to find themselves back in a spot that they've been longing to be at since Drew Brees retired.
I think so too. That's going to be an interesting division to watch. I think, like you said, the only team that, in my opinion, I think it's going to be the same. The only team that makes the playoffs is the team that wins the division, and will probably, there's a good chance it might also be the only team that has a winning record again in the division. So it's going to be interesting to see this NFL season and who comes out of it quickly. Quick 30 seconds before we get to our final note. Super Bowl teams.
I was about to get to that. Out of the AFC, it's taking everything within me not to say the Chiefs. I just don't think there's another team that can match up with them.
Mm-hmm.
So from the AFC, I have Kansas City. Hear me out on the NFC. I think a wild card team will somehow LARP their way to the Super Bowl. Philadelphia has sometimes got this overarching problem of looking past competition.
Mm-hmm.
I think the team that comes out of the NFC will come out of the East.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Do not tell me that Danny Dimes is going to take the team to the promised land.
No.
Don't say it. Oh, God. They're going to put a single focus on you. No, go to Carlos. There we go. Do that.
I'm scared it's going to be the Cowboys because of just the rest of the talent that they have around Dak. And I think it's going to bail him out, unfortunately.
What is wrong with you?
I'm just being bold with it because I look at the NFC. It's a crapshoot.
It always is. It's the NFC.
Outside of Philadelphia, it could be anybody else. But I think this may be the year because we've been talking about it for so long.
Oh, God.
It's also the last year for Dallas to be able to be competitive. We might be going back to the olden days of that's just my pick.
So, I think out of the AFC, I think it's hard to, like you said, go against Kansas City.
It's hard.
Mainly because of Mahomes, because of the star that he has created himself to be out of tech.
And the championship will probably be either Chiefs, Bengals, Chiefs, Bills.
It will. I don't think that's going to vary at all.
No.
I think it'll finally be I want to go Bills. I really do. I want to go Buffalo just for my own fandom's sake. But I don't think the Chiefs are giving up the AFC right now. I really don't. And if somehow Josh Allen can get past him, great.
All the power to him.
Joe Burrow's already done it once. Can Josh Allen get past him? I think it's the main looming gray cloud in Buffalo. Can they get past Kansas City? That's what they're gearing up for every year, is getting past Mahomes in the playoffs. Out of the NFC, I know this hasn't happened in God knows how long, I feel like, but
A Super Bowl rematch.
I think so. I think looking at the NFC, for me, it is very, very hard-pressed to find somebody that will beat the Eagles. The only teams I could see would be the 49ers. The Rams ain't got it anymore.
No.
Seahawks are not there yet. And those are the only other teams out of that division in
I
the
was going to say
West.
there's nobody out of the South that can beat Philly.
No.
And the only one I think that can beat Philly within their own division is them beating themselves.
Right, and that's the thing. So and the only other team that I could see is if somehow losing Thielen and Cook makes them better in the Vikings, but I don't think so.
I don't think that makes them better. I think
No.
they get worse.
No, they probably have like 10 wins on the season and that's it because of it. But
So
I really think it's I
Chiefs,
don't
Eagles.
I think it's a rematch. I really do. As much as I hate to say it, because I hate rematches multiple year and year and year. Curry versus LeBron in the finals for 5 straight years. But I just don't see a team beating the Eagles out of the NFC. I
don't either.
really don't. And I think of the AFC, it's just going to come down to if the Bills can get past them or not. Because as much as I want to believe Cincinnati's going to get to the AFC Championship game, I don't have them there. I have them losing in the divisional round to probably Buffalo.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance it's a Super Bowl rematch out in oh God, where's the Super Bowl this year? I'm blanking. Las Vegas.
Yeah. At Allegiant.
Yeah, I think and that's going to be scary for the Chiefs because that's familiar territory for them because they play there every year as a division opponent. I see a Super Bowl rematch. So, quickly here, our final note as we have crossed over the 2-hour threshold.
It's been a while since we've crossed this threshold.
It's like the second episode that we've done that. Specifically focusing in on the West, the Astros finally have the division lead for the first time this season.
Pow, pow, pow.
Infatuating that with a series sweep over the the Rangers. A historic weekend nonetheless, setting a record. It was the first time in baseball history that a team had 25 runs in a weekend series with 16 home runs in one series.
We hit a lot of long balls.
We did. And, especially Altuve made some records. He had 4 straight home runs in 4 consecutive innings. One in the 9th inning of the first game, and then one in the first, second, and third innings of Game 2 of the series. Mauricio Dubon and Jose Altuve becoming the first players ever to go back-to-back with home runs out of the 9-hole in the leadoff spot twice in a single game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean...
And then Abreu last night hit a grand slam.
Brantley hit another one as well. Abreu, I think, had 2 home runs in the game yesterday.
Yes, he did.
It was an offensive thrashing, if you will.
I said in my report this morning, an onslaught.
Yes.
We just didn't stop.
No.
We didn't let off the gas. The only other time that I've seen a team being able to keep up this much offensive production was this year's Sam Houston Bearcats baseball team.
I'm sorry. I just saw a tweet from Fax Sports MLB on Fax. If you want to go look them up, great content. It's awesome. Breaking. Houston Astros granted permission by MLB to play all their postseason games at Globe Life Field. Quote, "We don't think the Rangers will be using it," close quote, Rob Manfred said in the statement. Go follow. It's a great
That's
read.
great.
But
But
yeah,
still,
it's
phenomenal.
It's insane.
This division has turned on its head. Like I thought it would. It
Yeah.
happened a little later than I thought it would, but I knew at some point that Texas was going to have a collapse.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to come at the hands of their bullpen.
Yeah.
Exhibit A in this series, their bullpen.
Yeah.
The only time that the starter ever had problems was last night, and the starter was Max frickin' Scherzer.
Yeah, they got to Scherzer early. Only 3 innings of work for him. And they completely
They shelled him.
They did, and it was surprising because looking at that matchup last night, Verlander versus Scherzer, that was one of the best pitching matchups that everybody's
Why
expecting
wasn't that on
this season.
national television? It was a Wednesday night, obviously. But
Wednesday night in America on Fox.
that's not a thing.
It needs to be.
That's
As
not
I
a
lose
thing.
my headset,
But
yeah, I mean, 39 runs officially scored for the Astros. I want to say 25 runs off of home runs, I think, throughout the weekend. But, yeah, and I mean, you look at the Mariners, they're still within it. Technically, the Rangers are still within it.
yes.
But getting the Silver Boot Series as well, winning the season series against the Rangers helps you out in these last couple of weeks before the postseason gets here. 3-game lead of the Rangers, 1-game lead over the Mariners. That's not over by any long stretch. As you look at the rest of the season, they have one more series against the Mariners, September 25th through the 27th in Seattle. That will probably determine the division.
I think so too. The good thing for the Astros is that coming up over these next few series, they're going to get a little bit more cupcake opponents. They have a mediocre San Diego team coming to town, coming up starting tomorrow.
And after that, they also host the Athletics.
Then they host the A's. Then they go on the road to Kansas City. Then they come home for a series against Baltimore.
Best team in the American League.
Right. That will be a critical series.
Yes.
I believe we are. What do we? We are probably going to that Wednesday game.
I believe so. Because
Yes.
technically, right now, we're 8 games behind the Orioles for the 1 seed.
Yes. So, in hindsight, that would be a very critical series to have.
Right now, we're the 2 seed, even though we have the 3rd best record in the American League. Because the Rays lead the wild card
Got it.
at 85 wins.
But you look at that. Yeah. So 3 games against San Diego, 3 against Oakland, 6 games against Kansas City.
Yeah.
I feel you need to go 10-2 in this stretch
Oh, yeah.
to be able to have yourself in a good spot. You go 10-2 in that stretch alone, your record would be 90-63. So you don't get that 100. You don't get the
Yeah,
century. You don't get the
that's fine.
century mark like you've had in previous years.
That's fine.
But
Division win, I think, is the only thing they care about.
that's critical. The remaining 9 games that I left out, the 3-game series at home against Baltimore, that critical 3-game series on the road in Seattle, you finish on the road against Arizona, who in every aspect has actually had a better year than some people expected. They're second in the NL West right now, so not an opponent you can sleep on.
Granted, by like 14 and a half games.
Right,
or
because
something
the
like that,
Dodgers
but-
decided to wake up.
Yeah.
So
But point being,
you have some cupcake opponents
Yeah.
that you need to win games against. In a perfect world, I'd say you sweep them all.
for me, you at least win the series. You don't have to sweep the Mariners, but at least go 2 of 3. Now, there could be a situation where the Astros are behind a game when they face Seattle.
You need to sweep them.
You have to sweep them at that point. But I think if there is a sweep that has to happen, not a sweep that should happen, but a sweep that has to happen, and it's going to be tough and pretty much impossible to sweep this team, it's your best remaining opponent
Baltimore.
in the Baltimore Orioles. Because right now, I don't think they're trying to go for a 1 seed. But
They very well may land in it.
that's the thing. They're within shooting distance of it. They're 8 games behind the Orioles with about 20 games left to go. Somewhere about 20 games left to go.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Baltimore not shooting for the 1 seed.
No, they have the 1 seed right now. I'm saying the Astros getting to the 1 seed. But, again, that's not the main concern. But for me, if you want to really help yourself,
When
you got to sweep the Orioles.
Yes.
That's the sweep that needs to happen. Everything else, like, yeah, you should sweep the Athletics. You should sweep the Royals.
You should win 6 games against the Royals.
You should win a series against the Padres. I don't think you'll sweep them, but I think you should win a series against them.
I think they may drop tomorrow's game because they're up against Blake Snell.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
And then you're throwing Hunter Brown. Not to take anything away from Hunter, but he has.
But it's Blake Snell.
It's Blake Snell, and Brown hasn't had a great year.
Yeah.
Saturday, it's Seth Lugo versus Christian Javier. I think Javier wins that hands down.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday, you throw J.P. France, who I know has had his struggles as of late, but I think you win that game. So you go 2 of 3 against San Diego, and you come out 82-62. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Seattle is in Tampa at the Trop. Not a gimme series for them. As for Texas, they are home against Oakland. So you got to hope for more bullpen collapses from them.
You have to remember something else about this, the 39 runs and the 16 homers they put up. Dubon started in center field every game of the series, and Abreu was at first every game of the series. You know who did not start the entire series?
Yiner?
Him and Chas McCormick.
I think McCormick one night was DHing because I remember him.
Maybe.
I remember him hitting in the series because.
But yeah, I'm a Chas guy. I love Chas to death.
Chas
he
hands.
should be He should be the everyday starter in center. That's a whole different controversy that we can get into later.
We don't need to get into it, or we're going to break 3 hours.
We are, but it's still a 3-headed race for the West.
It is.
Which is good to see because it hasn't been like that for a long time.
It's either been the Astros. Well,
It's been the Astros. The Astros are the Astros.
In the 17, it was the Astros. In 19, it was the Astros.
In 20,
20,
it was
that was
the
a
Astros.
that was a weird year.
It technically wasn't the Astros because we had a losing record that year. I think the
In-
Rangers won the division. that year.
But in 19, you forget the A's made the wild card game that year.
They did, and then
They did again in 20. 21, it was the Astros.
Yeah.
22, us and the Mariners.
Yeah. So
we finally have competition.
yeah, it's good to see the Wild West return because the Wild West is always fun. It's stressful, but it's always fun.
Yes.
But I think it's going to be a fun race for these last 3 weeks of the season. I think as long as you take care of Seattle when you face them, you should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've kind of not demoralized. I think you've taken care of the Rangers enough now to where as long as you don't get swept 2 straight series by somebody, which based on the opponents, they shouldn't get swept 2 straight series
You would hope not.
or get swept at all for that matter. The only one that could happen against would be Baltimore, but I don't think you're going to get swept by Baltimore considering what happened the last time y'all played against Baltimore. I think that the Astros should be fine. They'll get into the playoffs no matter what. I think it's just a matter of, are they going to be the winners of the West again? Or are they going to fight with the Rays for the top spot in the wild card? The Rays currently, if you put the Astros in the wild card, the Rays have a 5-game lead over the Astros for first.
If I'm the Astros and I'm ending up in the wild card,
It's probably the two.
to be honest, I want to be the 6
Mm-hmm.
because you're playing the team that comes out of the Central, which will probably be Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
You have a better shot at going deeper in the playoffs as a wild card as the 6 seed simply because the AL Central is garbage.
Yes. Yes.
If you are the 5, you are playing the best remaining, the best of the rest of the wild card.
Best of the rest, yeah. Yeah, so it's going to
So,
be interesting to see how
You're
the
playing.
rest
You're
of the
playing
season
Tampa.
goes.
You're
yeah.
playing Tampa if you're the 5,
Yeah.
and that's not a winnable. I don't think you can win that.
No, it's a
Tampa-
tough series.
I know Tampa's got their own inner turmoil that they're dealing with,
Yeah.
but it's a tough series. But it'll be a lot of fun these last 3 weeks.
It will. It will. So that, I think we'll finally do it
Mm.
for our show this week.
I can
2
go home and
hours,
take a nap
15
now.
minutes now.
I can go home and take a nap.
Exactly. But, yeah, that'll do it for us here this week. Next week, we'll break down week 1 of the regular season of the NFL. We'll talk a little bit more Huntsville football, recap and preview. Bearcats will recap the Air Force game because they have a bye week next week, so we won't really have to talk about U of H just yet. But we'll do all that. Well, like I said, we'll talk about the Huntsville game against Belton. We'll preview the final non-district game of the season, and hopefully, maybe have a positive update about hopefully playing a game in the new stadium next week.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Let's cross our fingers.
Cross our fingers on that one. Don't forget to tune into the ball game tomorrow. 7:30 kickoff.
Yep.
6:45 pregame on 101.7 KSAM and right here on the KSAM YouTube channel. Myself, Brian Adams, and Kendall Morris down on the sidelines. We will have the call of that ball game tomorrow in Belton, and then me and Brian will have the sorry, here. Here
we were
against
Belton last year.
Sorry, here against Belton. I got ahead of myself. And then on Saturday, me and Brian will have the call on GoBearcats.com and the Bearcat Sports app of Sam Houston versus Air Force. Should be a fun weekend.
Absolutely. So that'll do it for us here this week. Again, thank you for tuning in. And we will see you next time. Next Thursday, I think, is going to be our new time now, or new day, I should say, for this podcast. So we'll see you next Thursday for another edition of the KSAM Sports Podcast. So long, folks.